photograph was provided to me.
Okay.
When I initially saw it, it may not to a normal voter or user that looks to pick this up, but again, I examined all types of media in all types of ways, and it jumped out at me, and I requested to get a copy of that image, because to me, that was very damning. And then that photograph was an overlay, and it did confirm my conclusions that it was a shrinkage, and that it was a 19-inch image printed on a 20-inch ballot.
Should there ever be, as Mr. Liddy characterized, a shrink-to-fit ballot that comes out for some people's ballots and not others?
I'm here to state the technical scientific facts. I gave the options. Mr. Liddy's assumptions of a shrink-to-fit is inaccurate, and to boot, or to further on add, that if the ballot definition is 20 inches and you print it on 20-inch paper, shrink-to-fit will do nothing. The margins will be exactly the same as they are on a regular ballot, and they should be tabulated. But what he referred to cannot happen. The only other technical possibility for that happening is if somebody messed with the print drivers and made, even though 20-inch paper was loaded, made the printer think it was 19 inches, and that would cause the shrink to fit. That's the only technical option that would address Mr. Liddy's scenario.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. No further questions, Your Honor.
Well, may we excuse the witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. You're welcome, sir. You're excused, sir. Mr. Olson, who's your next witness?
Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to call Aaron Smith.
Your Honor, I'm not sure that we have Mr. Smith on the witness list.
Absolutely, was disclosed.
On the witness list that we just filed with the court yesterday?
I'll have to look. I know that we disclosed him.
I don't see Mr. Smith on the list for this.
Saying that he's on the list.
The list I'm looking at, Your Honor, doesn't show Aaron Smith designated as a witness. If Your Honor wants to give me a few minutes, I can go through my emails.
Looking at what the court was given. And
I don't know that we provided that list, Your Honor.
I think you also. We also, I think there was an email communication from plaintiff's counsel expressly asking us to take Mr. Smith off of the list.
No, we did not take Mr. Smith on.
we're now burning time.
Okay.
Trying to find out who Mr. Smith is and where he is, so.
Right. Can you show me that list? Can I see the list? Your Honor, at this time we would call Bradley Benencourt.
Very well.
Your Honor, we're going to have a change of plans. I'll call Heather Honey. Can you ask Honey to come in? Heather.
I couldn't catch that. I heard change of plans and he turned around.
We're going to call another witness, Your Honor, Heather Hunt.
Sorry about that, Your Honor.
Or was the witness waiting outside?
Yes, she's coming in now.
Could you just hold on 1 second, have her stay outside just a second?
Hold on 1 second.
Thank you. This was another issue that was raised in the 807 notice by plaintiffs that they were going to use hearsay. I apologize, Mr. Olson, you're having a hard time hearing me, and I'll try and speak up. The disclosure that I received had a listed Exhibit A. There was no attachment. So all I have is information that this witness is going to testify about a voicemail from someone with a first name, no last name.
Well, Your Honor,
I don't have any substance.
it's a voicemail from somebody by the name of Betty, who
Well,
identifies herself as working at the Department of Elections for Maricopa County. The voicemail was left to my client in response to a FOIA request, a Public Records Act request that was made for chain of custody documentation. And the voicemail, we believe, Your Honor, is a statement against interest. Because they basically say, well, don't know.
okay.
It had been disclosed, Your Honor.
Okay. Who's going to respond?
Your Honor, I will. Number one, I'm going to,
Mr. Liddy?
thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to object to calling this witness for the purposes of testifying by hearsay testimony by somebody named Betty, who is not a party in this case, and therefore cannot make any statements, admissions on behalf of the party. And this so-called voicemail has no authentication, so I would object on foundation as well, Your Honor. And Your Honor, we don't have it. It hasn't been disclosed.
It's been disclosed, Your Honor. This court even has it on trial. But, Your Honor, Betty identifies herself as someone working in the Maricopa County Department of Elections. She also identifies that she is responding to my client regarding a Public Records Act request that was, I'm sorry, I said my client. She was responding to my witness regarding a Public Records Act request. It was my client who made that Public Records Act request. And Betty is explaining in the voicemail that they're still looking for the records, but they have no idea, and she's got to go on vacation, so she should call back and talk to somebody else. This is a Public Records Act request, Your Honor, that is directly relevant to the trial here today.
That's not my problem. I agree with you. I see the relevance of what you're arguing. My problem, and where I'm focusing my questioning, is the authentication and the disclosure of this, because you're asking for this under 807 as an exception, because there's not another recognized exception to the hearsay rule, and I didn't see anything disclosed. You're telling me this today. This is the first I'm hearing it. So
Well, Your Honor,
you're asking, this 807 is the exception when everything else is gone. This is the Hail Mary that says,
Understood, Your Honor.
I got nothing else,
We
Judge.
put it in 807 just in case, but I believe it is a statement against interest, especially in this case. We have pending litigation between my client and the county regarding their operation of this election, Your Honor. And it is a statement made by Betty identifying herself as an employee of the Maricopa County Records Department. My witness, Your Honor, will get on the stand and testify that she deals with Betty with respect to public records
Okay.
requests.
Very well then. Okay, so that's your offer of proof that your client was, not client, your witness was going to testify that this is a known person to her. In other words, she could recognize a voice, she knows this person, she has dealt with this person as a representative of the defendants with other public records requests. Did I get it right?
You got it right, Your Honor.
Mr. Liddy?
Your Honor, first, we have not received this, so we object on that basis. And second, there is no Betty that's a party. We can't authenticate who she is, and she cannot make an admission on behalf of any of the parties in this litigation. And the fourth point, Your Honor, is a public records request is not one of the two counts before this court this time.
Public records request, Your Honor, is specifically aimed at Mr. Richards' testimony this morning. They have documents related to chain of custody for election day activity. When they don't, Betty says on this voicemail, Your Honor.
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm sorry.
Now the counsel's testifying.
I'm not testifying, I'm making argument, Your Honor, regarding the evidence.
What you're making is an offer of proof. Correct, Mr. Liddy?
I'm doing that as well. And I can submit one formally if you would like, Your Honor. But in terms of offering proof to this court, my witness will testify that she is familiar with Betty. My witness will testify that her employees are familiar with Betty. My witnesses will testify that she works with Betty in getting records from Maricopa County
Okay.
in response to FOIA requests, Your Honor.
And you've also told me that this was disclosed previously, yes?
I am, Your Honor, yes.
When was it disclosed to?
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor, this last week has been like 4 months. And if you want, Your Honor, it's gonna take me a good 45 minutes to look for disclosures. But
Stop 1 second. You're an officer of the court. I'm just asking for your word. If you tell me it was within the last
I'm
week.
telling you it was disclosed, Your Honor.
You're telling me within the last week,
Yes, Your Honor,
as opposed to this morning, something like that.
Your Honor, that I have created on 2 separate occasions at their request that I give them access to all of our records via a link so they can go online and download them, and I can show this court that I provided them at least 2 links to do so.
Wait a minute. I don't want to waste a bunch more time on this. We've already spent a lot of time on it. I'm just down to the last little consideration, which is disclosure, so they're not shocked by this. Disclosure is different than saying, here's where all my stuff is, you can dig it out, or it's in there somewhere. This would be a specific, you did a specific notice under 807, and so you realized that there's an issue with the authentication and the hearsay. So all I'm looking to do is verify that this is not something brand new today in terms of identifying this witness in court today.
It is not, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Liddy?
Your Honor, we've been able to find under 73 and 74 document titled placeholder for voicemail, and then E, document titled placeholder for voicemail. I would argue, Your Honor, that that does not fit the requirement for disclosure.
You want to play the voicemail?
Yes, I am, Your Honor, but that is the court's exhibit list. I am not allowed to upload audio-visual files to the court system. I had an assistant come by and drop before noon, just before noon, a flash drive, which was rejected. They have these audio recordings, Your Honor. I would guarantee you, as they stand here today, they know who Betty is.
Oh, wait.
Somebody knows who Betty is because she works in the elections department.
When I say stop, that means stop. Okay.
Yes, sir.
First of all, your understanding of the website uploading links is different than mine. you can't upload those. Second of all, you did bring a flash drive by yesterday, but your office was told, we can't do that. The clerk of the court uploads and the exhibits, and so those have to be uploaded through that website link. And apparently there isn't anything uploaded there.
Your Honor.
Is there uploaded today?
They were uploaded to this. We took everything we had in our disclosure and we uploaded it to the system.
The clerk is telling me that they don't have your exhibit uploaded, so what you would be doing is playing something extraneous that you have that's not been uploaded into the system.
Your Honor, we tried to upload all of our documents,
Okay.
but we are unable to load audio.
I'm not doubting you, Mr. Glenn, in that regard at all. Coming back to this, what I wanted to focus on is whether the defense had notice of this or not. Have you heard the voicemail before?
No, Your Honor, I have not heard the voicemail. None of the attorneys here have heard the voicemail. And we can vow that there's no one in the Department of Elections, Public Records Department named Betty.
Well, here's what I'm gonna do, okay? Because it's taking too long. You can call your witness can testify, and cross-examination can happen, but not play the video or the audio clip because it's not uploaded, it's not in the system. I don't have that disclosed.
Your Honor, based on representations by counsel, we could always play it real quick before I bring the witness in. Counsel represented that there's no one by that name who works at the elections department.
No, we're not gonna go, I'm not gonna have an evidentiary hearings on this issue, okay? It was raised earlier in your notice. I told you that the attachment wasn't there. Now it's not in the exhibits. We're just gonna move on. You can go ahead and call your witness. There'll be cross-examination. You can redirect, but we're not gonna play a clip that's not uploaded and not previously disclosed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would Your Honorable Court reconsider if I can go online at some point today before I'm done with my witness and show something that says you cannot upload audio-visual files to the system from this link? I tried anyway, Your Honor.
No, I don't know that you tried. Okay. I'm listening to two sources. Since statehood, the clerk of the court has been separate from Maricopa County Superior Court for whatever reasons were decided at the time of statehood. So they have a separate system. I cannot tell the clerk of the court how to do business. They run the exhibits, and so I'm looking to that website and my understanding of it, my clerk telling me what can be uploaded. I am not doubting you, Mr. Glenn, that you tried to upload the exhibit. The operative question is whether or not it's a surprise to them, meaning the defendants, because they have not heard the video clip. That would be something, whether it's uploaded or not, you would have given them previously. So your question to me is whether I would reconsider that ruling after having heard the evidence if you make an offer of proof separate and apart from the witness's testimony, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. I'll accept that. You can go ahead and make an offer of proof. Do you have that right now?
The audio recording?
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor, we can pull it up.
Well, that's what I want you to do. Give your offer of proof.
All right, and may I play it, Your Honor?
Playing it for me, yes.
Yes, that's what I mean.
This is part of your offer of proof, Mr. Glenn.
Let's see, do we have the... Yes, go with 74. This is what's listed as Exhibit 74, Your Honor. For defense counsel's sake, it is listed as Q1.1. sorry, Your Honor, I'm hoping she didn't say she was Betsy.
Hi, Michelle, this is Betty. Hi, Michelle, this is Betty calling with the Maricopa County Elections Department. I'm so sorry that I'm calling you back so late. I was getting your message yesterday. I still don't have information. Christy is waiting to receive information as to where that document is. So we haven't forgotten. We just haven't heard back. And I just wanted to give you that update, which is really not an update, but it is still on our to-do list to see where we can get that for you. Once we do have it, we will call you and let you know. I am actually going to start my holiday tomorrow, and I'm going to be off all through the following week. So if you need to touch base, I would say go ahead and touch base directly with Christy, and then she can provide any updates. But she knows that we need to get you that information and reach back out to you. So that's all I have. I know it's not much, but I wanted to at least get you that information. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. And if I don't talk to you, have a fabulous Christmas and New Year, and perhaps we'll talk in the okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. Hi, Michelle. This is Betty calling with the Maricopa County Elections Department.
Is that the same one?
Yeah. It just looped, Your Honor.
Looped. Okay. Very good. All right.
That would make an interesting crank phone call, Your Honor. That somebody identifies themselves in the Maricopa County Elections Department, stating their name and saying, we're still waiting for the record responsive to your request, Your Honor. My client will testify as to who this individual is. I'm sorry, not my client, my witness. My witness will testify, Your Honor, that she interacts with this individual when she's fulfilling FOIA requests from the Maricopa County Recorder's Office.
Very good. Okay. Go ahead and call your witness. I'm going to give it the weight I deem appropriate, when all the dust settles, but you can go ahead and call your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ma'am, if you could just come forward, if you would, and stand in front of my clerk. Raise your right hand. She'll swear you in.
Did you swear to swear the testimony about the table being true, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Ma'am, if you could just move your way, make your way around to the witness stand and have a seat. As soon as she's situated, you may proceed, Mr. Ballot.
Good afternoon, Miss Honey. Can you please state your full name for the record?
Heather Penny.
What do you do, Miss Honey, for a living?
I'm an investigator. I'm also an auditor. I do supply chain consulting as well.
How long have you engaged in that type of work? As an investigator?
Over 30 years.
Over 30 years. Okay. And so, what do you do as an investigator? Just investigate?
Yeah, I mean, I do corporate investigations. I do, as I mentioned, supply chain investigations, counterdiversion, those sorts of things. And recently, over the course of the last about 2.5 years, our research has sort of expanded into, sort of the government accountability, transparency, and elections.
Okay. Do you also conduct a great deal of open source research?
I do.
And what is open source research?
Open source investigations, open source intelligence is just the use of publicly available information, public records, to do investigations or research.
All right. So like Maricopa County Elections Department records, would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you can get those through how?
In Arizona, it's a public records request that you submit.
All right. And so in terms of your work doing open source investigations and things of that nature, I know you're shy, but I also know you teach people. Can you give me some background in that area?
Yeah, I do training on open source investigations, open source research. I've been doing that sort of training for about 5 years now, and I instruct people.
Who do you train on behalf of?
Well, I'm a small business owner. I own my own company, and I wrote my own curriculum, and I train clients, military clients, special forces. I train law enforcement. I train private corporations, and I train journalists as well, right? So that's an awesome use of open source investigation skills for journalism.
And I think you said special forces?
Yeah.
Do you do any work with the department or the DEA?
I don't believe I've ever had students from the DEA, like Secret Service, like I said, law enforcement agencies, local police departments, those sorts of things.
All right, very good. And so you said you also got involved in election integrity issues. How long ago?
About 2.5 years ago now.
2.5 years ago? Okay. And just what states have you done research in?
Well, some of our research has been in all 50 states. Specifically, we looked into vulnerabilities in the UOCAVA, the non-military UOCAVA voters. In addition to that, we've done very specific types of research in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Arizona, and a little bit of stuff in Georgia as well.
All right. And so, with respect to your work in the state of Arizona, do you know what is the EPM?
Yeah, the Election Procedures Manual.
Okay.
Familiar?
And I would like to pull up the Elections Procedures Manual right now, Your Honor, Exhibit 60. All right, and can you see the monitor in front of you?
I can.
That appear to be the Elections Procedures Manual.
It does.
Are you fairly well versed in that document?
I mean, I haven't committed it to memory in its entirety, but I'm familiar with the relevant statutes as they relate to the research that I've done in Arizona.
Okay, thank you. And so let's talk about just generally, explain to this court how you became knowledgeable about Arizona elections as it relates specifically to the issue of chain of custody.
Yeah, so, obviously the idea here, I mean, I do like vulnerability assessments, I do supply chain consulting, so what you're looking for, right, is researching what are the vulnerabilities in the election system, for example. And so one of the areas that we looked at was the Dropbox chain of custody. And the election procedure manual specifically has guidelines starting on page 61, item number 7. There are about 8 specific requirements that the recorder is required to do regarding the chain of custody of Dropbox ballots. So in addition to the EPM, when we were researching this, we spoke with representatives who had actually participated in the process. We talked to ballot couriers who had actually retrieved ballots from Dropboxes. We spoke with Celia in the Maricopa County Elections Department. She was very helpful. She provided a lot of really useful information in terms of their process. The EPM is sort of the guideline for the entire state, but how each county implements the process is different. For example, we did research and investigations into the chain of custody in a couple of elections in Arizona, several in Maricopa, but we also looked at the process in Pima County as well.
Okay. So you spent a great deal of time talking to people in Arizona that actually work in the elections department?
Yes.
That actually work at Runbeck?
Well, I spoke with Jeff Ellington about, I want to say nearly a year ago or so, and he was able to answer a bunch of questions that I had about how Runbeck works. Jeff Ellington is the CEO of Runbeck. And recently I had the opportunity to talk to Runbeck employee who provided a declaration in this case.
Okay. And you also have the opportunity to work with other election integrity experts and attorneys
Yes.
in the state of Arizona? All right. And so let's go back to Pennsylvania really quick. Pennsylvania is where you got your start, isn't it?
Well, I'm from Pennsylvania, so that's what definitely piqued my interest in sort of the vulnerabilities in the election system and what could be done to fix that.
In Pennsylvania, I believe it was 2020, wasn't it?
Yes.
What did you identify as a particular vulnerability in Arizona at that time?
Well, in Pennsylvania, I think you mean.
Yes, Pennsylvania.
On objection, relevance?
Sustained.
Your Honor just gets to.
Sustained.
Oh, sorry. All right. So with respect to the state of Arizona again, how many elections have you looked at in the state of Arizona with respect specifically to the chain of custody issue?
3.
3. Which ones were those?
It was the 2020 election, there was a 2022 municipal election, and then this 2022 general.
Okay. And so I've got a demonstrative presentation, Your Honor, I would like to pull up. And it has citations to all of our exhibits.
Ron, I'd like a moment to review this with my co-counsel before it's published to the witness.
That'd be fine.
Your Honor, I'm going to object in that this exhibit, there seems to be more of an exhibit than demonstrative, contains many signatures from individuals whose signatures should not be published to the public, Your Honor.
Your Honor, signatures are routinely published, and do you have a cite to that statute, 16?
Let me ask a question, if I could, please.
Yes.
Mr. Brown. Are these signatures related to the 2020 election in Arizona?
You know, I believe these are,
May I answer that question?
yes,
Well, not to.
these are related to 2022. This is the 2022 election. The documents contained within this PowerPoint are from the 2022 election. They were all provided either in response to my client's FOIA request, or they are public source documents that are published online, including, there's a citation right off the bat, Your Honor, to the EPS. And so, there's nothing in here that's been a surprise. This chart made by my client has also been disclosed. And with respect to signatures, Your Honor, signatures are public all the time. Signatures of voters. People check their lists, their roster lists. I'm sorry, I'm not active in politics, so I don't know what it's called to run for office. You got to go get whatever it is, enough signatures to get on the ballot. Those are accessible to the public. Okay, I can go on the county recorder's webpage right now, today, this very second, and I can pull up titles, deeds, financial documents, all kinds of records that specifically contain signatures. These documents, Your Honor, which I'm going to move all of the underlying documents into the record, contain no PII. We're not talking about birth dates, social security numbers. We're not talking about driver's license. We're talking about Maricopa County's own documents.
Mr. Liddy?
Your Honor, if if I heard counsel correctly, he wants to move these in as exhibits, so therefore they're not a demonstrative. And they have not been provided on his exhibit list.
Your Honor, I'll tell you what, the moment I come across the document that has not been provided on my exhibit list that this court doesn't have, then I'll stop with the demonstrative. I'm not at this time seeking to admit this demonstrative exhibit into the record. I may do so after my witness testifies. But right now, I would like to walk through this demonstrative, which is based on documents received from open source, the EPM. You can go online, you can Google it, and there it is. Documents that were provided by Maricopa County.
If I may, Your Honor.
Yes.
These documents appear to fall under Title 16-168. Any person in possession or precinct register or list in whole or in part, or any reproduction of precinct register or list shall not permit the register or list to be used, bought, sold, otherwise transferred for any purpose other than otherwise authorized in this section. And this is not the use authorized in the section for these documents.
Was that section F?
It was section F. It's for
All right.
government, excuse me, it's for election officials or perhaps expanded by court to government officials, and the witness is not a government official or an election official, Your Honor.
Your Honor, if the entirety of section F were read, there are very clear and very specific exclusions, including the media, Your Honor. The media have access to signatures. Elections, Your Honor, is an exclusion. It does not say government officials running elections. And this case, Your Honor, is about an election.
What's the statute again, 16-1?
Your Honor, it's Title 16-168F. If I may, Your Honor, I would ask that the counsel direct his comments to the court and not to my co-counsel.
Sorry, I look around when I talk.
Okay. Your representation is that there's none of the information prohibited in the form of month, date, year of birth, social security number, driver's license number, non-operating identification license number, Indian census number, father's name, mother's maiden name, state or country of birth. None of that is contained. And then signatures and voters' email addresses. And then none of that's contained in the information, or are you saying it's an exception because it's available to the media?
There are signatures contained, Your Honor, but following the portion I believe you just read, it specifically carves out exclusions, and one of them are for elections. If we didn't have these exclusions, Your Honor, candidates wouldn't be able to get on the ballot because they couldn't do signature positions. Okay. There are exclusions for the media. I believe it goes elections media, Your Honor, but I may be mistaken. I tend to forget.
This is limited to, 16F is limited to persons in possession of precinct voter registration or lists. And then it says,
Well then, Your Honor,
it says, can't be bought, sold, or otherwise transferred for any purpose except for uses otherwise authorized by this section. And you're correct that it talks about otherwise as uses, including newspaper, radio, television.
I would also point out, Your Honor,
Yes.
that none of the documents contained within this presentation are poll lists.
Your Honor,
None of them.
What are we going to, what is the demonstrative exhibit in the testimony going to demonstrate?
It's a demonstrative exhibit, Your Honor, prepared by my witness to walk the court through the various chain of custody documents used by the Maricopa County Recorder's Office, as well as the Board of Supervisors. I think this
To show,
just to show Your Honor and the court and the witnesses. The media deserves to know, Your Honor.
no, show what?
To show the process, the documents used, okay? How the flow of ballots moves. And I will tell you, Your Honor, it's one of our contentions that because Maricopa County does not adequately maintain chain of custody of Dropbox and mail ballots, that it becomes much easier to infuse ballots into the system. And that's one of our allegations, Your Honor.
Okay. I understand what your offer of proof's about.
Your Honor, the signatures contained in this proposed demonstrative are not voter signatures, and so I would withdraw my objection based on that.
Very good. Then we can proceed. Mr. Blum, you can proceed with your demonstration, and we'll get to that other part later about the exhibits you want to admit after you're finished.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did I move to admit Exhibit 60, the EPM? If not, I do so now.
The objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Objection, relevance?
The EPM, not the demonstrative exhibit.
Oh, no objection.
I didn't think so.
Thank you.
60 is admitted.
All right, and so your familiarity with EPM came from you reading it and talking to other people, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the extensive research we did, yes.
All right. And the EPM has guidelines, I'm sorry, I think I misspoke, didn't I? They're not guidelines?
I believe they're requirements. It says that the recorder shall develop and implement the secure ballot retrieval and chain of custody process.
Okay. So the county recorder or officer in charge of elections shall develop and implement secure ballot retrieval and chain of custody procedures.
Yes. So there's 8 guidelines. This slide only has a couple of them on there, but the requirements are things like, 2 couriers of differing parties, date and time of arrival at the Dropbox, date and time of departure from the Dropbox, and the date and time you arrive at the county. But most importantly, it requires that when that secure transport container is opened, that the number of ballots inside that container shall be counted and noted on the retrieval form. And of course, these retrieval forms are specific to one specific Dropbox. So it's a one-to-one correspondence.
Okay, so based on the law then, if I were to go to what's designated as Dropbox P57 and retrieve the ballots from there, I would create a chain of custody record that identifies the 2 people who went to get the ballots. It identifies the time they went there. And more importantly, it identifies the number of ballots contained within that box.
Well, to be clear, the form is called the Early Voting Ballot Transport Statement. And it is the ballots are not counted at the time of retrieval. Instead, what happens is those couriers, they go out to the Dropbox, they open the Dropbox, they retrieve all of the ballots, they put them inside. Again, I'm going to tell you how Maricopa County does it. It's not necessarily how all of the counties do, but specifically in Maricopa County, the 2 couriers put the ballots in the box, they close the transport container, they zip tie it with security seals, and they document the fact that it was the 2 of them, the location, the time, etc., as I already mentioned. And then that secure container is transported back to the county.
Okay. And does that sound like a pretty secure process when that is done?
Yeah, I mean that's the process, and that's compliant with the law in Arizona. So.
But do you think it's important to have the number of ballots in each box?
Well, what the law requires is that when it's transported back to the county, and when the recorder or the recorder's designee opens up that container, that at that point, when the container is open, the recorder must count those ballots and record the precise number of ballots inside the container on that retrieval form. And again, the retrieval form is required in the EPM.
Okay. And really quickly, I'm going to sort of interrupt your PowerPoint from time to time because I think you said EVBTS?
Yes.
Early vote ballot transport statement?
Right. I actually have that on one of the slides so that you can see it.
Understood, but I want the court to be able to see a standalone of that document, and then we'll turn back to your slide. Is that fair?
Understood. Sure.
Could you please pull up exhibit, now I forgot what it was. 75, the R1 on this side. All right. Can you see the document that is currently on the screen?
Yes.
And that's an early voting ballot transport statement, correct?
Correct. It's the retrieval form used in Maricopa.
Does that look like it's completely filled out?
Yeah, it looks great. It has all of the required fields. If I was doing an audit of that, I would say that is a perfect score.
So you'd say perfect score for this one, base numbered 009916, correct?
Yes.
Are you happy with that?
Yeah.
All right, good. So you're not here just to criticize, are you?
I'm not here to criticize at all. I just want to sort of shed some light on the vulnerabilities in the system in the hopes that they'll be fixed.
And how many, in response to my client's FOIA request, or I keep saying FOIA, I apologize, Public Records Act request, how many of these specific documents did you get?
I apologize. The precise count has escaped me, but I will tell you that they produced. They said that they produced all of the documents that they had. We specifically asked for these documents as well as a bunch of others, but they said that they provided all of the early voting ballot transport statements that they had for the entire election. And we had them for every day that drop boxes were open. So we compared that to the list of locations when they were open, and we did have these transport statements for each and every day that they were open, with the exception of Election Day. There were no early voting ballot transport statements provided for Election Day.
And that's where I was going next. The exhibit we have currently on screen, exhibit number 75, and really quickly I'm just going to move to admit exhibit 75.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, we can go back.
71's admitted. All right, wait, is it 75?
75, Your Honor. It's yours. Your 75 RR1.
No, there's only one number. It's the court's number that we're referring to. Not mine, yours, his. It's 75, and 75's admitted.
Understood, Your Honor. I say R1 for their benefit.
Got it.
Very good. 75, Your Honor. All right. And, I'm going to sort of divert a little bit here because do you have any problems with any of the early ballot transport statements that you reviewed for the beginning of early voting until Election Day?
No, I think that they actually, compared to previous elections, they did a really, significantly better job with the documents this time around. But again, there were no documents produced for Election Day, which amounted to a significant number of Dropbox ballots.
All right, and so let's go back a little bit to talk a little bit more about your history as we sort of go through this. But what did you find when you did the 2020 election? You looked at all the documents they had for chain of custody, correct?
Yeah, so we made a couple of observations. The first one was that there were a significant number of these early voting ballot transport statements that were not properly completed. Specifically, I would say the biggest issue was that there were quite a few of them that did not.
Objection, Your Honor. Witness testifying about 2020 relevant?
Yes, she is.
Yes, Your Honor, it's just relevant to my client's, I'm sorry, my witness's history, A. And it's also relevant to, Richard's testimony. He said he came in and he made it better and changed forms. And it was my witness, Your Honor, that sort of led that effort to get forms changed.
Okay, but that count was dismissed. The process changes that could have been done either by the Arizona House, Senate, Governor working together, or the Supreme Court. Might have been, whatever could have been, that is dismissed. So, I understand. I'm not going to debate with you endlessly back.
Understood, and Your Honor, I won't go there, but.
But you are now.
No, I'm sorry, Your Honor. I'm not trying to be argumentative or anything. If we get the end of our presentation of evidence and defendants stand up here and raise the laches allegation.
They won't be doing that because the motion ruled on that. There was the laches argument that was upheld with regard to the 2020 election and the other part of the case.
Okay.
So today we're talking about, hopefully she's shedding light, and her statement, shedding light on vulnerabilities to be fixed, is exactly what was dismissed. I'm looking at today what happened in the 2020 election and understanding that, and to that end I've allowed this presentation. And so far, even though she said that, you're explaining how the process works, and that's fine. But going into the 2020, we're out of that.
Understood, Your Honor.
Thank you.
All right. Can we change the slide? Thank you very much. Can you please explain to the court what this all means?
Yeah, so this is a diagram of Maricopa County ballot chain of custody from the voter to tabulation. And so what you notice is if you vote on election day, you put your ballot in the tabulator. But if you vote early in person in Maricopa, or if you vote by mail, there are several transfers of the ballot and therefore requirements for chain of custody. And what's interesting or unique about Maricopa County is, to my knowledge, they are one of the only counties in the country that outsources the intake or the receipt of their ballots to a third-party organization. So, for example, we talked about the EPM and the requirement for chain of custody from the Dropbox to the county. In most counties, that's the end of the road. You retrieve the ballot from the Dropbox, you transport it securely to the county, and it's tabulated there. That's not the case in Maricopa County. In Maricopa County, they then have to, after they've received it in the county and processed it according to the Arizona law, then they must again maintain secure chain of custody as they transfer it from Maricopa County to Runbeck, and then again when it comes back the other way.
Thank you very much. And how many steps are there? If you vote, let's say you get you either, I guess you get a vote by mail, couldn't you? Or you could go into a vote center and get a ballot. Sure.
Right, so on the next slide, I kind of just point out the fact that a Dropbox in Maricopa County does not just contain mail ballots, right? So mail ballots that are, sent to the voter and in the mail through the U.S. Postal Service. You can go to, it was the next slide.
Oh, well, I'm not done asking you questions, Ms. Honey.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were asking me about the different ways that I'm sorry.
All right. Why is it that chain of custody, when all of these transfers takes place, is so important?
Well, I mean, chain of custody, first of all, it's the law, and secondly, it's what allows sort of the security of the ballot, right? If you have 10 ballots and you have 10 ballots and they're transferred to the next location and there's still 10 ballots, then, you know, you feel like that's a pretty good secure chain. But if, you know, if there are ballots added or subtracted, you become aware of that if you are properly managing chain of custody.
Okay, so is what you're saying that at each of these different points in this process where a transfer is made, there are vulnerabilities in the system that could either induce or reduce the number of ballots?
Well, I mean, I think what the reason that you maintain chain of custody, the reason that it's part of business, it's part of elections, is because if failure to maintain chain of custody presents a situation where ballots could be added, but ballots could also be removed. And so that's why this whole chain of custody is important enough to have its own laws written about it.
Okay. And can you pull up Exhibit 102?
Is there another exhibit they're pulling up?
Excuse me, Your Honor?
Is there another exhibit they're pulling up?
Yeah, he's pulling up Exhibit 102 right now.
102?
Okay. Well, that's... Okay. All right. And so you can see the screen, Miss Honey?
Yes.
And is that the chart you made that is that we marked as exhibit? The court's marked as Exhibit 2.
It is.
I move to admit Exhibit 2, Your Honor.
Objection, Your Honor, foundation.
102. You got
Yeah.
me
Oh, I'm
confused. You
sorry,
said 2. Now you got you.
Did I say 2?
Yeah.
I apologize, Your Honor. It's 102.
That's why I had this look on my face.
I'm sorry.
102.
102, Your Honor.
And which is there an objection?
Yes, Your Honor, this was offered as a demonstrative, and we're fine with that, but if it's going to be offered as an exhibit, it lacks foundation and no authentication.
Well. Okay.
Miss Honey, did you
Wait,
make
wait.
something?
Let me roll. I think that that's what the witness has done, is she's testified as to her understanding, and that's what this represents, her understanding of the system as the law is. And your objection next might be,
My objection is I'd like to know where she got it, who created it.
Did you make this chart, diagram, whatever you want to call it, Miss Honey?
I made it in PowerPoint.
And did you make this based upon your
Thank you, Your Honor.
multiple...
Based on that, no objection.
great, 102 is admitted, thank you.
All right, can we go back to the slide and move on to the next one?
Which exhibit?
Oh, the demonstrative is the, I'm sorry, the PowerPoint.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, can you tell us what this slide shows, Ms. Honey?
Yeah, so this slide shows that in a lot of counties, a Dropbox is only for a place for people, an alternative to returning their mail ballot by mail. But in Maricopa County, the Dropboxes are in fact a repository for a ballot that's mailed to a voter that they choose not to return by postal service. But it's also where people who vote early in person, who go into a vote center, show their ID, they they get their ballot printed, they vote, put it in an envelope, and they sign the envelope and they drop that ballot envelope into a Dropbox. So when we talk about Dropbox ballot retrieval for early voting, it includes early in-person and mail ballots that are deposited in a Dropbox as well. So it's those two different types of Dropbox ballots.
Okay. And so I believe you had testified previously that you have reviewed all of the early ballot EVVTSs. And it's my understanding you praised Maricopa County for having improved their documents and actually followed the procedure?
Yes, on the documents that were completed, but again, there's the absence of documents for election day ballots, which again is a significant number.
Okay. Well, your FOIA request, my client's FOIA request, requested all of the chain of custody documents for Maricopa County election day, correct?
Correct.
Have they provided anything?
Yes, they actually provided all of the documents that we requested with the exception of the Maricopa County delivery receipt form.
Okay. The Maricopa County delivery receipt form. Can you please tell the court what that is?
So the Maricopa County delivery receipt, as I mentioned in that like previous sort of thing, if you can go to the one that actually has it on there. It is the document, the chain of custody document that is created at Maricopa County to record the precise number. That's not this slide. If you go to like two more, the precise. That's the one. Perfect. Thank you. Oops. Back one. There you go. Perfect. It's in this diagram here. It's the number 2, right? So when the Dropbox is when the ballots are retrieved from the Dropbox, the early voting ballot transport statement is used to document the chain of custody from the Dropbox to Maricopa County. Again, when it gets to Maricopa County, what the law requires is that they break open the seals and they count the number of ballots inside that transport container, and they record that precise count of ballots on the early voting ballot transport statement. From there, again, this is unique to Maricopa County. Maricopa County election officials then create this delivery receipt form, which is like a half sheet, and that has on it the precise count of the ballots that they are then loading on a truck and transferring to Runbeck. The larger thing there, the thing that has the number 3 on it, is a document that's created at Runbeck, basically just saying, hey, this is how many ballots were dropped off. So, and to answer your question, what we did not receive is the number 2, the delivery receipts.
All right, and I'd like to move away from the PowerPoint again really quickly and open exhibit number 67.
I couldn't hear you because you turned away.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, 67. All right, Miss Honey, you were talking about the early voting ballot transport statement. Is this it?
I mean, that's one of them. This one is from ASU West from October 25th.
Okay, by one of them you mean there were many of these?
Yes, so there's one of these forms for each day that a Dropbox is open. So if there are 50 Dropboxes open on a particular day, there are 50 of these forms created because there are 50 retrievals of ballots.
Okay. And you reviewed all of these?
We did?
All right. And already moved this way into everything?
I don't have that you did.
Yeah, I don't believe I did.
No.
Move it 67 into evidence, Your Honor?
No objection, Your Honor.
Thanks.
67's admitted.
All right. Do you have any problem with any of these statements for the early voting period?
No.
No, you've reviewed them all.
Yeah, I mean, I think they like I said, they did a much better job.
All right. So could you actually go through all of these, add them up, and figure out exactly how many ballots Maricopa County retrieved from Dropboxes up until the day of the election?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, and you can do that?
Yes.
Is that what you're supposed to be able to do?
Well, I mean, on a daily basis, yeah. I mean, you have to do it for each and every retrieval according to the law.
All right. Thank you very much. And so, transport receipt again. That, what is that?
So the delivery receipt is, again, that half sheet that I had on the display there, which is created at Maricopa County, at MacTech, that accompanies the ballots as they travel from Maricopa County to Runbeck. So that when they arrive at Runbeck, Runbeck knows precisely how many ballots are on that shipment.
All right. Do you have all of Maricopa County delivery receipt documents?
We do not have any. We requested them, but they said they had misplaced them.
And those are the ones that were for election day, correct?
Well, actually, we didn't get a single one of those for the entire election. It is the testimony of or in the declaration of the Runbeck employees that no such documents existed for Election Day.
For election day.
Right.
Okay, what about prior to the election?
Yeah, so this form was actually created for all of the days prior to Election Day.
And I'm sorry, but my question was specifically related to election day. There were none.
Well, we did not receive any. They said they misplaced them, and the Runbeck employees said none existed.
Okay. All right. Have you been trying to get the records?
We have.
Do you know somebody by the name of Betty that works at the Maricopa County Department of Elections?
So we as, in response to our public records request for these documents on behalf of Kari Lake, some of the documents they provided to us electronically, and others they said were in binders and we had to go and copy them ourselves.
Okay.
So we had a couple of representatives go down to Maricopa County Elections Office to copy them. And and Betty and Christy were sort of overseeing their copying of the records.
Okay. Have you met Betty?
I have not met Betty.
Then I got to correct the misrepresentation to the court, Your Honor. I believe that my witness had. And so I apologize and I correct that. Are you familiar with Betty's voicemail?
Well, I called Betty a couple of times to try to get the records, but when they were there actually scanning all of the records, she exchanged business cards with Michelle, who was one of the representatives.
Have you spoken with Betty?
No, she's not responded to
Never
me.
been able to get a hold of her?
No.
And can we go to the next slide, please? What is this document again?
So this document is created at Runbeck, and this records the total count of the ballots that are received from the MECTEC delivery truck. And so they break this down into a couple of different ways. The post office inbound is separated because, of course, those are slightly different ballots, and we're not really talking about those today. But the regular MOB is the mail ballots, right? So that would be the green envelopes. And then you'll see down at the bottom the CTR. That's the vote center ballots. Those are the white envelopes for early in-person voting.
Okay. All right. And what do these documents really tell you?
So these documents reflect the number of ballots that are received at Runbeck. So again, this is created at Runbeck, and you'll see like in the line here, this document is dated 11/6, and it is the precise number of pieces of regular MOB and the precise number of pieces of the CTR. And that's because they copy this information from the delivery receipt form, that half sheet that's generated at MECTEC, and then this form accompanies it, and again, they keep a copy of it, and the other copy goes back with the driver to Maricopa County to document that in fact he did take the ballots as he was supposed to, delivered them to the possession of Runbeck, and completes that chain of custody.
Okay, so these then are created by Runbeck when Maricopa County officials drop ballots off at their third party. Is that correct?
Correct. It's the drivers though, so it's not like actually the recorder or anybody doing that delivery.
Understood. And so Runbeck employees, they simply estimate the number of ballots?
No, just to make the distinction. For the post office inbound, what happens is the driver, if they're, stops at sometimes he makes a special delivery, but sometimes he also stops on the way. So he'll go to the U.S. Postal Facility. So the post office doesn't deliver the ballots to Runbeck. The post office doesn't deliver the ballots to Maricopa County. The driver goes to the facility in Phoenix, and then he loads the trays of mail ballots onto the truck. And then that is taken to Runbeck. And for those ballots, they count the number of postal trays, and they estimate that. There is a receipt that accompanies the post office ballots, but Maricopa County does not use that to record the precise number. However, they started preserving that at Runbeck.
Okay, so Runbeck has started preserving documents obtained from the United States Postal Service regarding how many ballots the U.S. Postal Service was transferring to Maricopa County's care and control?
Objection, Your Honor.
Custody and control? Is that your understanding?
Hold on, there's an objection.
Objection, Your Honor. The witness said the post office provides estimates, not counts of the number of ballot packages.
Shaking her head, no, Your Honor. That's not what she said.
What she said.
Well, he's objecting to the form of the question. I think what he's saying is it's leading.
That's fine. I'll ask.
Rephrase it. Thank you.
Based upon your knowledge, training, experience with respect to Maricopa County chain of custody and election-related mail ballots, do you know if the Postal Service provides receipts showing the exact number of mail-in ballots that the United States Postal Service is transferring to Maricopa County?
Right, so yes, the answer to that is, it is my understanding that they do. They tuck them into the trays, so it's, again, my understanding that they're difficult to find, but that's how they base how much they're gonna charge. That's like how they bill for the postage. So that's how they count it. And of course, they have like machines that do that at the post office.
Okay, and so Maricopa County then gets a receipt, or at least the Maricopa County driver gets a receipt from the Postal Service that says essentially how many pieces of mail ballots were delivered to Maricopa County driver, correct?
That is my understanding.
Okay. Does the county maintain those documents?
So to my knowledge, they didn't turn any over to us. So let me just start with that. We didn't receive any in response to our request for those public records. But it's also my understanding that that the Runbeck employees attempted to sort of return them to Maricopa County, and they said they didn't need them.
Okay. And so is there any way to tell, other than this inbound receipt given by Runbeck to the Maricopa County driver, exactly how many ballots left Maricopa County were picked up at the post office and actually delivered to Runbeck?
Well, on this form here, on 11/6, you can see that they have a precise count, but unfortunately, on election day, because they were not using the other chain of custody documents that we described, this was the one and only form that was used, according to, again, the records requests that were produced for us, and based on the Runbeck employees who described receiving the trucks coming with no corresponding documentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hunt. And so I would like to exhibit, is this 66? Yeah, go to 66.
We on 66? Is submitted. Thank you.
Okay, go back to the purple. Ms. Honey, how many ballots Maricopa County claim they received on election day that were not tabulated on?
So I think your question is, how many Dropbox ballots did they report?
Yes.
Yeah. So initially, on the morning after the election, they reported that there had been 275,000. I think that Stephen Richer said approximately 275,000 Dropbox ballots had been dropped off on election day.
Did that number change?
That number did change.
What is the number now?
I believe that the number went from the 275 on the 9th. They also had a press conference during which at the press conference, reporter Richard also talked about what an extraordinary number the 275 was.
Ms. Honey, that was not my question.
Sorry.
My question was, what is the number now?
I believe they ultimately said it was 292,000 that had been dropped off at Dropboxes.
As you sit here today, how many of those ballots have legal chain of custody?
Based on the documents provided, none.
Your Honor, objection calls for conclusion.
Rule 701.
Wait. You're asking her, according to her understanding, from what she's experienced and observed, what's her number?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ma'am, if you can answer it, go ahead and answer it.
Yeah, so we reviewed all of the documents provided by Maricopa County in response to our requests, and the answer is that none of the documents that they created meet the requirements from the EPM.
You had the opportunity to talk to somebody from Runback following this election, is that correct?
I did.
And did you have an opportunity to read that Runback employee's declaration?
I did.
All right. And so I would like to, let's see here. I'll find it here. And while he's pulling this up, Your Honor, may I ask the court a quick procedural question?
Go ahead.
When we began this morning, Your Honor noted that it would be unduly difficult to get this many witnesses through, so it said it was going to admit declarations, with the exception of Kurt Olson, that were attached to the complaint, Your Honor. And
I didn't say that.
I'm sorry, did I misunderstand?
I know what I said, but I know where you're going. You want to admit those now?
I would like to, yes, Your Honor, admit Leslie White and,
Ms.
well,
White
let me make
was.
sure. Denise Marie and Leslie White. And those are listed as, Denise Marie is Exhibit 46, Leslie White is Exhibit 47.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Liddy.
Objection hearsay, Your Honor.
Very well. All of your objections were preserved. These are two of the ones that I had listed specifically this morning and told you that I needed the numbers. Now I have the numbers for at least two of these, okay? So your objections are all preserved. All three defendants have joined. They were in writing under the Rule 807 notice. And so over your objection, I'm going to admit 46 and 47.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Honey, the Rundeck employee, Denise, did she tell you that, did she tell you about any problems at Rundeck with respect to chain of custody?
Yes, she expressed her concern over the fact that the procedure that had been well established throughout the election was not used for the large number of election day Dropbox ballots that were received.
Your Honor, I'm sorry. I want to object and move to strike everything that was just said there. While the declaration was admitted, now we have this witness testifying about separate hearsay statements made by this Denise individual who allegedly used to work at Runback. This seems to me to be a separate issue from the admission of the declaration itself, but I just want to clarify that the hearsay objection extends to any hearsay testimony that this witness will offer in addition to what may or may not be in the declaration.
Your Honor, the county joins that objection.
Which exhibit was in it? This is
Denise
Marie or
yes,
Leslie?
Denise Marie 46.
46.
And Your Honor, I'm not asking any questions outside the scope of this declaration.
Your Honor, the declaration is in evidence. It's in evidence now over our objection. This witness shouldn't be able to repeat hearsay again, in a sense, put Ms. Marie's words into her own mouth if Ms. Marie said them herself in the declaration. The court can consider Ms. Marie's declaration, giving it whatever weight it deems fit, but to have this witness repeat what is already hearsay again, I think is inappropriate.
Okay, we're not gonna go back and forth. Here's, I believe, as I told Mr. Olson earlier, the court does not pronounce somebody an expert, but if they're testifying and they have information, experience, or education beyond that of the trier of fact, it's instructive or informative. And this witness, I find, meets that. If she's relying upon this, which she has just said, to formulate her opinions, I'll let her do that. I understand the objection is that it's hearsay, but that's going to be something that you can cross-examine. For instance, if that's incorrect, then I'm not going to tell you how to cross-examine. You already understand all of that. So, Mr.
Okay.
Lemon, proceed, please.
Okay, so lack of chain of custody was one of her concerns.
It was.
All right. You talked to Leslie White as well?
I did.
Was lack of chain of custody one of her concerns?
Yeah, so Leslie was actually an observer at MECTEC on an election night when the ballots were received back from the Dropboxes. And her concern was that specifically the seals were being removed from the transport containers, and the ballots inside were not counted. That was a requirement as she understood it, and the fact that they were just taking those ballots out of the transport containers without counting them was her primary concern.
And then, okay, so we have two different people you have spoken to working in two different places, correct?
Correct.
One's here at Runbeck, the third-party vendor, and one's here at MECTEC, right?
Correct.
MC Tech?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And both of them are both telling you that there is no chain of custody on election day for ballots being transported from MC Tech to Runbeck. Is that correct?
Correct. They weren't following the legal requirements for chain of custody. So there were seals on the containers when they transported them, but the specific issues were that they were just cutting them open, taking the ballots out, putting them in trays without regard to how many, or there was no documentation. There were handbags and purses where they were processing the ballots. That was
All right. With respect to sorry, I just lost my chain of thought. With respect to Denise White, did she raise other concerns with you regarding potential vulnerabilities with our election system in Maricopa County?
Yeah, so two issues, right? So the first one was that the trucks were coming with ballots, that there was no associated counts, right? So that was number one. They just didn't know how many they should have had. So she was concerned about that. But then after the election, on the evening of November 9th, right? So November 8th is election day. November 9th in the evening, she was called by her supervisor and asked to go down to the system and actually pull the total number of ballot packets that had gone through the system to provide a count to Maricopa County.
Why?
Well, I don't know.
Foundation and hearsay on this one as well.
I'll withdraw the question. Improper. Okay. And so she gets a call. She's been tasked with an assignment, a job, and that is to go find what the numbers are to report those to Maricopa County because they don't know.
Objection, Your Honor, again, foundation.
Is that what she told you?
County joins.
Yeah.
Great. What I told you before, I'm going to assume all the defendants join the other objections that you've made, okay? And your objection is speculation or?
Your Honor, I guess foundation and speculation, and I just want to make clear that we have a continuing objection to any of these continued hearsay conversations that this witness is relaying.
So noted.
I'm almost,
Pardon me?
I'm almost.
And
That doesn't take care of this question.
yeah, I was just gonna say, Your Honor, the question was, what did she say and then why? And now we're getting into this witness's motivation, which is now beyond hearsay, pure speculation and lacks foundation.
My understanding was it was calling for this witness to speculate about why Maricopa County did something. And so, rephrase the question.
Did this witness tell you that she was concerned about how Maricopa County was conducting operations with respect to Dropbox ballots?
Yes.
Did this witness, Denise, did she also tell you about possible vulnerabilities where people can inject ballots into this system?
Right, so what she said that Runbeck employees were permitted, almost like it was a perk of employment, to bring their ballots from home. So their ballots from home, their family members' ballots, bring them from home and add them to the inbound scans.
Is that consistent with Arizona law?
No, so
Objection, Your Honor, calls for a legal conclusion.
You're asking for her understanding, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your understanding, ma'am, if you can answer it based on that?
it is my understanding that ballots must be returned to an authorized drop-off location. Maricopa County publishes a list of those authorized drop-off locations, and Runbeck Elections is not one of those.
All right. Are you familiar with these social media posts I put up here?
I am.
Okay. And this is these are tweets by Maricopa County Elections Department, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'd move to admit these are, Your Honor, Exhibit 63.
Mr. Flynn, can you bring this back up on the screen? I would be
Oh,
sure.
I apologize. I didn't take it off. I think we need to go back a page or something.
Go back to the last. This one?
Give the defendants a
Yes,
moment to
yeah.
look at it. Any objection?
Mr. Flynn, I'm sorry, I can't read it. You're referring to that's an actual tweet. Just look at yours.
I can have my witness reader.
No, I,
Look at it on the screen.
I'm just a little bit of that. No objection. No objection.
very well, that was 63 that would be admitted.
Are you familiar?
Your Honor, hold on, can we
We believe
sure
it's-
about the number?
I believe it's 70, Your Honor.
That's 63.
63?
Did I say that was Stephen Richard?
I'm looking at 63. I pulled them up as you discussed
Was
them.
it?
I think that's 70.
Yeah, 70 is Stephen Richard. Okay.
Which one are we,
It's numbered on the sheet we received. Sorry, Your Honor.
which one are we moving, Mr. Glenn?
I am, I think I might have written these down backwards, Your Honor. I'm going to move Exhibit 70.
Well,
And then
before you're gonna get to 63, I think that you looked at 63, defendants, correct? Did you have any objection to 63?
Your Honor, I have not looked at 63, but I did look at 70, and we have no objection to 70.
Take a look at.
Oh, is this 63 right here? Okay, just one moment.
Thank you.
No objection, Your Honor.
Are you moving 63 and 70 into evidence, Mr.
Yes, Your
Glenn?
Honor.
They're admitted.
Thank you. Okay, and so this is a, 63?
70 or 63?
63.
Huh?
63, let's just go to 63 and then do 70.
That's 63.
This is 63. Are you familiar with the tweets that are up here from Stephen Recorder Richard?
Yes.
And is this where he was saying there were 275,000 ballots?
Yeah, this was a series of tweets, after the day after the election, where he explains that they had processed all of the ballots and transferred them to Runbeck, and again, it was 275. 200,000 was the number. He says over 275, 275 plus. Obviously, it's a round number, right? It's 000. So you know, and it's not
So
exact. Yeah.
may I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
All right. In this tweet, Recorder Richard says, last night from midnight to 5 a.m., we sorted those 275,000+ documents or ballots so they could be scanned in and image captured and run back.
Correct.
Or signature captured. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Does that indicate that those ballots had already been sent to run back at some point, at that time or some point after?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation and foundation.
If
Speaks
they
for
had-
itself.
Wait.
The tweet speaks for itself. Mr. Richard was on the stand. They could have.
I was going to withdraw. I withdraw.
Withdrawn. Thank you.
Did they count these ballots before they put them in a truck and sent them to run them?
There are
Objection,
no-
Your Honor, foundation again.
Which ballots? Rephrase.
The 275 Mr. Richard's talking about.
Same objection.
I'm sorry. Rephrase the whole question for the witness, please.
Okay. Do you have any evidence they counted these ballots before they put them in a truck, departed from the Maricopa County facility with ballots from Maricopa County residents and delivered them to a third party?
No, there's no record that they counted any of them.
Thank you. Did Maricopa County, knowing we had these claims, come here with their exhibits saying, hey, look, no harm, no foul, sorry we got them to you late?
Objection, Your Honor. Argument
Yes or no?
with
Hold on.
Okay, I'll strike
Save
that.
it for closing. Sustained.
Did you, Ms. Honey, have a chance to review the documents Maricopa County submitted as exhibits before this court?
Yes,
Did they provide those missing documents?
they did not.
Did they provide any documents that will allow them or their witnesses to sit up here before this court and do the math?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation and foundation.
He has reviewed,
You can rephrase it by saying to her knowledge.
to your knowledge, Ms. Honey, will they be able to put witnesses up before this court and do the math based on their own disclosure? And it's in-
No, to my knowledge, no. And I will like to also expand that we looked at the chain of custody documents that they did use on election day, which are those are called the precinct ballot reports, and the precinct ballot reports are really the chain of custody for those voted ballots that come from the vote center on election day, and it also includes, by the way, a count of the door 3 ballots. Those documents, which I have on one of these exhibits here.
Objection, Your Honor. I want to move to strike everything that witness just said about the precinct-based ballots as being completely non-responsive to the question.
I'm, sorry, Your Honor.
Re-ask the question. I'm too busy trying to follow, take notes, and keep up with the two of you. Re-ask a question.
The, well, to use an old adage, that's a road we're getting ready to hoe, Your Honor, so we'll just start from scratch and we'll go down that road. And so I believe we've pulled up what has been marked as Exhibit 65. What is that document, Ms. Honey?
This is an example of a precinct ballot report.
Precinct ballot report. What are they?
These are the documents, according to the Maricopa County poll worker training and the poll worker manual. These are the documents that are used when they close the polling places to provide chain of custody for the voted ballots that are, voted on election day. In addition to that, the poll worker training requires the poll workers to empty the drop boxes of all of the early voting ballots and place those in a container. And of course, there's no counting of those ballots. There's nowhere in this form to record a number. is really the point of this.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Honey. Anywhere in this form, can you find, well, I'm going to withdraw that strike there. Did you have a chance to review each and every one of these documents that the county provided?
I did.
You did. On any one of those, for election day, did you see any documentation of Dropbox ballots and the number of ballots contained within the Dropbox?
Definitely not the number of ballots. The seal numbers that were put on those containers are on here, but there's no ballot counts.
All right. And so if I look at the vote totals for tabulator 1, 494 in this example, and tabulator 2, 384 in that example, that's how many ballots were contained in the black bags. Is that correct?
Correct, if they followed the procedure. The misread ballots, the 101, would have been transported separately in that blue tote as well.
All right. If Recorder Richer hypothetically were to testify that, oh no, I'm not responsible for drop boxes on election day, would that be accurate?
It's my understanding, according to the EPM, that it specifically makes the recorder or the recorder's designee responsible for the secure retrieval of ballots deposited in drop boxes. So it would be my understanding that that applies to election day. There is no exception to the requirements for election day.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Hunter. I would, now I forgot what exhibit it is, Your Honor. Exhibit number 65, I move it into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
65 is admitted.
Thank you. You had an opportunity to review some of Recorder Richer's emails, is that not correct?
Yes.
And I'm looking for them on my list right now, but
They're on the PowerPoint.
what?
They're on the PowerPoint.
Oh, they're on the PowerPoint. Thank you, Ms. Hunt. Did you want to finish your PowerPoint? All right. I just don't want Ms. Honey to be duplicative for the court.
Sure.
But I do kind of want to, I think Recorder Richer's email is exceptionally important. And I believe I moved this into evidence earlier, Your Honor. Richard's, yes. M1 on our list. M1.
What is the court's designated?
Oh, these are 69, Your Honor. Okay, yeah, they're good.
This morning, Your Honor.
Go to the last page of this. Ms. Honey. Aside from making guesses, did Recorder Richer, based on documents, really know exactly how many ballots Maricopa County had in its possession?
Objection. So it calls for her speculation, and Recorder Richer was on the stand this morning. He could have asked the recorder that.
believe it did, Your Honor. And my question was related to based on county documents. Does Mr. Recorder Richard have any clue as to how many ballots he has aside from Vanessa? Based on county records.
And I make the same objection that it calls for speculation, Your Honor, as to what Recorder Richard, how he understands county documents.
Right. I believe the question can be phrased in terms of, does any of the documentation show or provide a method where someone, any county person would know?
Does any of the documentation show that Recorder Richard had any idea how many ballots he had on election day other than, mere guesses?
No.
The exhibit on the board, what does that say?
It's an email from Stephen Richer. It looks like it's Thursday the 10th, so 2 days after the election. And he says he's unable to reconcile. Basically, there's a 15,000 difference somewhere.
Unable to reconcile. The number he throws out is 15,000 though, right? I don't know where these come from. Is that any way to run an election, Ms. Hunt?
Objection, Your Honor. I want to the extent the editorial comment was embedded in that question, it should be stricken.
Which part of the question?
Your Honor, I can't remember what the exact wording was. It was.
I can't even. It's been a long week.
Maybe if Mr. Blunt could re-ask the question, we could avoid the.
I don't even remember what it was, Your Honor. I'm sure I'm going to re-ask it.
Go ahead.
All right, Ms. Honey. Thank you. I don't have any further questions. Oh, really quickly before I stop, I want to move to Exhibit 69, Your Honor.
The objection to 69?
I think not, I think it was already admitted this morning, but I don't believe they have any other objection.
You're correct, it was admitted this morning.
Oh, okay. Very good. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Just one moment, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Miss Honey.
Hold on a second.
Sorry.
I think that we should be taking an afternoon break for the sake of my court reporter's carpal tunnel syndrome if we don't. And so I would rather take the break now than start in and then take a break in 10 minutes. So let's reset for, I'm not going to do the math, whatever until 3 o'clock. We'll come back at 3 and resume with the cross-examination, okay? We'll off the record until then. Thank you.
All right.
All right, we are back on the record in CV 2022-095-403. This is Lake versus Hobbs et al. Present are the parties or the representatives in the council. We have Ms. Heather Honey on the stand remaining under oath, and we're ready to begin the cross-examination. You may proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Honey. And thank you for being here today at this trial. I know that all the parties appreciate your attendance. I just have a few questions for you. It's obvious to me that you've done a lot of work to try to understand elections, and that's more than what a lot of citizens do. But would you agree with me that election law is a complicated area of law?
I would agree with that.
And there are a lot of complexities to running an election. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Have you ever taken the election officer certification course that's offered by the Secretary of State?
I have not.
Okay. Have you ever worked as an election official in Arizona?
No.
Have you ever worked as a poll worker in Arizona?
No.
Have you ever been an observer at McTech, observing the processes there? And by observer, I mean an election day observer or a ballot count observer, an observer in official capacity at McTech.
No, I've never been a credentialed observer at McTech.
You've been to McTech though, correct?
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of.
I've not gotten a tour, if that's what you mean. I mean, I've been there, but I haven't gotten a tour.
Okay, all right. Now, you testified that you didn't receive certain forms in response to your public records request, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And is it fair to say that because you didn't receive those forms, you're assuming that they do not exist?
No, quite the contrary. I know they exist. They exist in more than one copy. I know that they exist at Runbeck because I've seen photographs of them. So I know they exist, and in fact the email correspondence between the attorney for Ms. Lake and your office was that, hey, if you can't find your copy, could you get the copy at Runbeck for us?
Okay. So you know the forms exist, they just haven't been provided to you?
They haven't been provided in about 3 weeks.
Okay. And Ms. Honey, I will let you know that we believe you're being honest, that you don't believe you've received them. We take a different position. Do you think it's possible that you were provided them and you simply missed them in the large stack of documents that you were offered to review?
Absolutely not.
Okay. All right. Have you ever observed the ballot pickup at the post office when the Maricopa County employees come, the election department employees come and pick up the ballots to transport to Runbeck? Have you ever been there to observe that?
I'm sorry, when they pick up the ballots at the post
At the post office.
No, but I did actually speak to 3 people at the Phoenix Postal Facility.
But you've never personally observed
I
that?
have not personally observed that.
Your Honor, I apologize for interrupting, but I believe we have the rule to exclude from the courtroom any testifying non-expert witnesses, and I believe one of those witnesses just entered. Mr. Sondergaard, I believe.
I have to rely on counsel for that. I don't.
What's the question?
You need to leave.
Oh, okay.
He's been sitting there for the last hour.
I did not see them, Your Honor. I was focused this way.
I believe the attention was brought to opposing counsel and thought it was Mr. Barris, but it was not.
I don't know who the gentleman is. I wasn't part of your conversation. I just know that gentleman's been sitting there for the last hour plus. But, so I don't believe it was intentional. I believe you're like me. You're intent and focused on what's in front of you. So I'm not casting any aspersions. Let's all be more astute. I guess that's the best I can do. Thank you for pointing it out.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Go ahead and proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Honey, I believe you testified earlier, correct me if I have this wrong, but I believe you testified earlier that the United States Postal Service provides an exact count of the ballots that are picked up by the Elections Department staff. Was that your testimony?
So I think what I said was that in the trays, they include a receipt, which basically is like a bill. How many ballots were, and it includes like the total amount of postage on that form, and it's actually tucked into the trays. I have some photographs of that as well.
Okay, and you said they put it in, you mean United States Postal Service employees
That is my understanding.
prepare the receipt and put it in. Okay, and is it your understanding that that receipt includes an exact number of ballots for that tray?
I don't believe it's for the tray. I think it's for the entire like pickup.
For the entire pickup?
Right.
Okay.
So however many trays are included, it's not a one for one like this is how many are in this tray. I think it's the whole. That's my understanding.
Would it surprise you to learn that the United States Postal Service actually weighs the trays and makes an estimated determination based on the weight of the tray?
Well, obviously that's a great way to do it. Weight counting is a very effective way of a method of counting paper.
Okay, thank you. I want to talk with you for just a minute about the woman who I believe is identified as Denise Marie. Do you know who I'm speaking about?
I do.
Okay. And I believe you testified that she was an employee at Runbeck. Is that right?
She still is an employee at Roving.
Okay. Do you know how long she's been employed there?
I think probably close to a year, but you'd have to look at her declaration just to be certain. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Do you know what her position is?
I know what her position, well, no. All right, I want to talk with you about Leslie White. And again, when I say Leslie White, you know to whom I'm referring. I do.
Okay. I believe you testified that she was an observer at McTech. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know whether she was a first-time observer, whether she was a repeat observer, what her background is with regard to the observation process?
I believe she said that was the first time that she had been credentialed to observe that particular process, right? So that was a little bit different than like the McTech observers who are watching, say, signature verification, for example, which I believe she also witnessed that process. But this was unique in that she was credentialed to watch that sort of incoming close of election night process.
But your belief is she was a first-time observer?
I believe that was the first time she observed that process, if that's what you're asking. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Did she, by any chance, mention to you that from her assigned location where she was at, she did not have a clear view of the activities on the truck or on the dock?
Right.
Okay. Do you agree with me when I say that Leslie White did not actually say in her declaration that she was worried that ballots were not being counted? That she didn't actually say that, I'm worried ballots are not being counted?
Are you asking if those were her words specifically
I'm
in
going to
her?
object, Your Honor. The declaration speaks for itself.
You can ask the question related to her statement, but I thought there was testimony as well about conversations with people. So re-ask it, Mr.
Would you agree with me that Ms. White, Leslie White, never actually said in her declaration or to you that she was worried that ballots were not being counted?
She most certainly said to me that she saw the seals being removed, the transport containers being opened, and that there was absolutely, that's in her word, absolutely no counting of the ballots. They were simply picking them up out of the transport container and putting them into trays, and then putting those trays onto like what she was calling a cage or a cart, and that they were just moving these through. She was concerned about that.
So in her declaration, she doesn't say that. She says, and I'm wondering if she said any of this to you. She was concerned with the disorganized way the ballots were being handled. She said, I did not see any person count any ballots or record any information. I didn't see it. But she didn't say it didn't happen. When she spoke with you, did she talk about what she saw and what she observed, or was she making statements beyond that?
So I think you're mischaracterizing what she said, but if you would like me, if you have a copy of her statement, I'd be happy to point out what I'm talking about.
It's all right. We'll move on.
Okay.
I want to come back to Denise Marie. You testified that, I believe you testified that she told you that Runback allowed, or maybe it just happened, I don't remember exactly what you said, but employees brought in ballots from home. Do you remember talking about that?
Yes.
Okay. And Denise Marie was concerned about that, correct?
Denise was concerned that this was basically announced as though it was a perk of working at Runback, and that they were permitted to do it. She thought it was, in her conversation with me, she thought it was, questionable practice, but that, people did it. She saw people do it.
Did she tell you how many people or how many ballots she estimated might have been subject to this?
Yeah, so she said she personally saw at least 50 that were brought in by employees and added at that point.
Okay, thank you. Now, continuing on with Denise Marie, there was some back and forth between Mr. Blem and someone for the defense counsel, and some objections were lodged, and so I'm not sure if you ever answered the question Mr. Blem asked. I believe he asked you if it was true that Denise Marie was asked to go get a ballot count because Maricopa didn't know. Did you answer that question? Do you have knowledge as to whether Denise claimed that she was asked to go get a ballot count because Maricopa didn't know?
I don't believe that's what she said.
Okay, very good.
But to clarify, she was asked to go get a count and report it back so that they could call Maricopa and say, hey, this is how many ballots we scanned, and subsequently the number that the county was reporting increased by the same difference.
Okay.
He was reporting 275. She counted the actual number of inbound scans, reported 298, and subsequently the number that Maricopa was reporting as the total ballots in the election increased by 25,000.
Let's talk about that for a minute. In your experience, just based on your knowledge in working with elections, is it typical for elections departments to do reconciliation of ballots, make sure that they have the numbers right?
Reconciliation should happen in multiple different places. For example, you reconcile the number of voters who check into a vote center to the number of ballots cast in a vote center. Those types of reconciliation are incredibly important.
Okay. And well, let's move on from that. I want to talk about what happens at Runback. Do you know what happens to the ballots actually at Runback? What the elections department and Runback employees do with the ballots there?
Yes.
What do they do?
So they load the ballots on the inbound machine. The inbound machine, by the way, is only operated by Runback employees. So they load them on, and they go through and they cut them off at about a 11,000 batch size. At that point, they stop. They create the paperwork for that particular batch of signature verification files, right? So they're scanning the the signature on the envelope. They're creating a file for that is then transmitted to Maricopa County so that they can start that signature verification process.
All right. So they go to Maricopa County to start the signature verification process. Is it your understanding that before a ballot, an early ballot, is tabulated, the elections department has to examine the signature and determine whether the signature matches a signature in the voter registration file?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yeah. Is it your understanding that before an early ballot is tabulated, the elections department looks at the signature on the affidavit envelope and must determine whether it matches a signature in the voter registration file for that voter before it's going to go to tabulation?
Yes.
Okay. So if employees at Runbeck put ballots into the stream at Runbeck, and let's say hypothetically that did happen, is it your understanding that those ballots would then go to McTech to be signature verified?
Well, to be clear, the ballots don't go for signature verification, the ballot images do. And yes, when they go through the inbound scan, they would be, but I don't believe that's the point. The point is that Arizona law says they're invalid ballots if they're not returned to an authorized location. So that's an opportunity to insert ballots. And if Maricopa County was aware of the precise number of ballots, then if they inserted 2, they would know they inserted 2.
So if Arizona...
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this line of questioning. This court would not let us come before it with evidence of signature verification. We wanted to. And now he's going right down that road, Your Honor. And if he keeps going down this road, I'm going to ask for a couple days next week to come to this court and talk about signature.
So you mean about the process?
The process is part of it, Your Honor. And he's talking exclusively about process. Her direct examination, Your Honor, was limited to talking about chain of custody with respect to Dropbox to Runbeck. And not beyond that point. And so, Your Honor,
Understand.
if that door wants to open, I'm more than happy to drive a truck through it.
May I respond, Your Honor? Or do you want to rule?
Go ahead.
All right. My response would be the road I'm driving down is a different road, I think, than Mr. Blum wants to drive his truck. I'm talking about what actually happens, and I'm talking about it from the limited perspective of understanding what the effect of these votes that may have been inserted at Runbeck would actually be. I'm not really talking about the signature verification process itself. I'm simply talking about what happens to a ballot that is at Runbeck as it moves through the system.
Your Honor, may it please the court, I'll stipulate that those 50 ballots they talked about got counted. But I'll also do so only on the understanding, Your Honor, that that is a concession by defendants that it is possible to inject illegal ballots into the system.
Your Honor, may I respond one more time?
This offer stipulates out there.
I understand, but I think this needs to be cleared up. Mr. Blem's making a legal argument that ballots that are harvested are illegal ballots and should not be counted. That's a legal argument.
Your Honor, I don't believe in my direct examination of this client, I ever even said the word harvested. Now, more than happy to talk about it, and as a matter of fact, I believe it was defense counsel who brought up 2,000 mules. I haven't said anything about it, Your Honor. I'm talking about chain of custody. The legal documents this county has
Your Honor, let me
to prove how many ballots they picked up from drop boxes and took to Runbeck.
Right.
let me change my statement. I understand it may have inadvertently irritated Mr. Blem. I didn't mean to do that with my choice of words, and I apologize.
Well, it's not about irritating Mr. Plum, it's just about making sure we're getting it right as far as what each side's allowed to go into. So if you want to...
Yeah, so let me amend my statement. What I was attempting to say was that Mr. Blem is making a legal argument that a ballot that is not deposited into the United States Postal Service mail or dropped off in a Dropbox is an illegal ballot, I believe is what he said. And that's a legal argument.
No, I think we're talking about chain of custody, if we could distinguish things. And he did discuss chain of custody very thoroughly with this witness. I believe I understand what you're asking about. He's correct that what you're discussing is the process for validation of signatures as it would relate to possible injection of ballots into the system without the chain of custody accounting for them. Have I got that right, Mr. Blem? Did you listen to what I said?
I did, Your Honor, but I'm kind of hard of hearing.
Well, I'm speaking soft, maybe. Do you want me to say it again?
Try a combination of both, if you would, please, Your
Okay,
Honor.
sure. If I've understood your objection, Mr. Blem, it's that you've limited your direct examination to chain of custody, and what is being talked about here by Mr. LaRue, the questioning is to elicit testimony about the handling of ballots that might violate the chain of custody if they're into the system, and why those ballots would still be subject to verification through the signature validation process regardless of how they came in. Your point is that you are saying, wait, it's only about the chain of custody, and if it violates the chain of custody, that's the analysis that you're end of story. That's where it goes.
Yep, what I'm saying is, Your Honor, the direct examination was about chain of custody and the importance of chain of custody.
Got that.
So that there are no points of access of illegal votes into the system.
Well, he's
I
taking words
imagine-
with the word illegal, and he's talking about the legal argument. What you're talking about, that there are votes that are not accounted for under the chain of custody that are placed into the ballot system or the election system.
But
Go ahead.
I can go down that road, Your Honor. It's illegal for a county elections official not to do a job they are legally required to do. So if we want to talk about illegality, we can go into that point.
I understand your point, but I guess you're objecting to Mr. LaRue going into his argument that separate and apart from your position there, that if in fact ballots were somehow put into the system, in this instance, I think we're talking about the run-back ballots.
And Your Honor, that's fine. I'll let him go down this road because it's my understanding that what he's saying is, it doesn't matter. The ballots were counted. And so I'll let him go down this road, Your Honor. But I'm going to reserve my argument.
Well, certainly. And I'm going to talk to you all about closing arguments at the end of the day today.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a few more questions, Ms. Honey. You're not an attorney, correct?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a legal question, but you only have to answer if you have an understanding about it. If you don't have an understanding, it's perfectly fine to say, I don't know. Are you aware that under Arizona law, a ballot is not actually unlawful if it is, the term that's used sometimes is harvested or ballot collection, but if somebody who is not authorized to handle it deposits it, or like what happened at Runback, if somebody brings it and inserts it into the stream, but not into a designated authorized Dropbox. Are you aware that under Arizona law that is not actually an unlawful ballot?
I think the term in the law is an invalid ballot.
Okay. Just 1 minute, Your Honor. No more questions. Thank you very much, Ms. Honey.
Your Honor, we would just have a moment to confer on the side if you have any other questions.
Sure, you may.
Good afternoon, Ms. Honey. My name is Andy Gao, and I represent Secretary Hobbs in her official capacity. I want to echo Mr. LaRue's thanks for being here today. I'm going to be, and I may surprise Judge Thompson as well, I'll be very brief. First of all, as you sit here today, you have no evidence that anybody intentionally interfered with the chain of custody of ballots in Maricopa County for the 2022 general election, do you?
Well, I don't think I said that anybody interfered with it. I said they failed to maintain their legally required chain of custody.
So your answer to my question then is yes, you have no evidence that anybody intentionally interfered with the chain of custody for ballots cast in Maricopa County for the 2022 general election, correct?
Ask and answer, Your Honor.
Well, I didn't hear it, so if you can answer it. If you understand it, ma'am, you can ask it. Answer it, excuse me. If you need it rephrased, I'll have them rephrase it.
Well, I think you're asking a question and sort of saying it in a way that I didn't say it. So if you would ask it in maybe a different way, that would be good.
Sure. You have no evidence that anybody intentionally did not obey the law with respect to the chain of custody in Maricopa, with respect to any ballots cast in Maricopa County in 2020 for the 2022 general election.
I believe I understand your question.
Okay.
And I would say that somebody, a person, and it's my understanding that the recorder is responsible for maintaining chain of custody. Somebody made the decision not to do it. And I would say that when they made that decision, knowing what the law is in Arizona, that was an intentional decision.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Honey, but again, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking what evidence. You have no evidence that anybody made an intentional decision to do anything here, correct?
Well, I think that
Your Honor, I think this is a yes or no question.
Yes, it is. If you understand the question, if you don't understand it, ma'am.
I don't understand the question. I think I felt like I answered it, so I'm
Okay.
sorry, I don't understand.
And then, other than the 50 ballots or so that were mentioned in one of the declarations about family members at Runbeck, you have no evidence that any other ballots were, quote unquote, injected into the system at any point in time, correct?
Well, unfortunately, because of the
I'm sorry, Ms. Honey, again, it's a yes or no question. Other than those 50, you have no evidence of that, correct?
Can you ask the question in a different way?
Certainly. There was some discussion earlier that the employee at Runbeck told you, and it's reflected in her declaration, that she estimated that there were approximately 50 ballots of either Runbeck employees or Runbeck employee family members who dropped off their ballots at the Runbeck facility. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And my question is, beyond what that particular person told you with respect to those approximately 50 ballots, you have no evidence that any other ballots were, quote unquote, injected into the system at any point in Maricopa County for the 2022 general election. Is that correct?
I could say that's not an answerable question.
As you sit here right now, you have nothing else to say on that issue beyond the 50 ballots that were specifically mentioned to you by that individual, correct?
No, I have something to say.
No, I'm asking about evidence. Do you have evidence?
Yes, I think that
Yeah.
the failure to have chain of custody makes it impossible to know how many ballots were or were not transferred.
But as you sit here now, the only ones you know about are the 50 that were mentioned to you by the one witness, correct? The only identifiable ballots that you can speak to today are the 50 that were mentioned by the Runbeck
I
witness.
can't identify those 50. I don't know who they are.
Thank you. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
All right. Down across.
Yes, Your Honor, I'm sorry. We have no further questions, and we have no objection to the witness being excused.
Miss Honey, you recall the last question you asked? You were asked?
Yes.
All right. Is your point that it is impossible to know if any and or how many illegal votes were injected into a system without valid chain of custody.
Correct, you can't tell how many potentially were added or how many were removed even. I mean, that's the whole point of chain of custody, to have that sort of security, and that without chain of custody, there's no way to know. And coupled with the the sort of changing numbers, it's very concerning.
All right, defense counsel asked you if there was any evidence of intentional conduct. You recall that?
Yes.
All right. If I, hypothetically, have a choice to get a cup of coffee or a cup of water, and I choose coffee, I didn't choose water. Do I have a choice? Did somebody choose, A, either not to make these documents, or B, to produce them to my client's attorney?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation, foundation.
I'm assuming you're asking the witness to the extent of her knowledge.
The extent of your knowledge, Ms. Hunt? Yes, I am.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, can you ask the question again? Sorry.
I forget these real quick, Ms. Honey. I'm sorry. All right. And so, Ms. Honey, A or B, to the extent of your knowledge, would it be an intentional act for somebody to choose not to make chain of custody documents to count the number of ballots? Or would it also be an intentional act to choose not to produce the documents that had been created?
Well, again, to the extent that they didn't count them, I think that there's no reason to believe that they did count them, or that any documents exist. I believe somebody made a decision not to maintain the chain of custody, not to follow the laws as they're written in the EPM. Somebody had to decide that.
Just as I chose to come to court today instead of stay home on the sofa, I made a choice. They have a legal requirement, though, don't they, to choose to make these documents? They don't have a choice not to make them, do they?
Right, there's no exception in the EPM to
I believe, wasn't it? Where's my exhibit list? I believe Secretary of State Hobbs, as a matter of fact, in a recent matter involved with Cochise County. And I think we got correspondence on that. It's an exhibit. And did you see correspondence from Secretary of State Hobbs
I did,
to Cochise County?
yes.
Okay. What did she tell them in that correspondence with respect to Arizona law and the EPM?
Objection, Your Honor, this is beyond the scope of the cross-examination or the direct at this point, and irrelevant.
It is not, Your Honor. They asked my client specifically if she had any evidence. And I want to make the point, Your Honor, that even their client says you have no choice. You must follow the law. When she told Cochise County, you must certify your election, Your Honor.
They're two different
She
questions.
said it in her letter.
There's, just to clarify, please. I'm not sure what the letter says that you're referring to. It says you must what?
She told the Board of Supervisors for Cochise County that they have no choice but to do their legal duty and certify the election to make her governor of the state of Arizona.
In that,
My argument here, Your Honor, that same legal duty applies to Maricopa County with respect to their obligation to follow Arizona law and the elections procedure manual.
no, okay, you were correct. They're obligated to follow the procedures in the manual, but the question that was asked is whether she has any direct evidence that there was an intentional decision to not make the documents or not produce the documents, is what I recall. And she didn't answer it directly. What she said in response was, they're supposed to do this, and the fact that it didn't get done tells me somebody must have made a decision. And that was the answer. So I think it's been asked and answered. To the extent that you're going to ask her about a conclusion of law,
Fair enough, Your Honor. I only got a few more questions anyway.
Please proceed, Mr. Martin.
I think if you recall cross-examination correctly, I got the impression that defense counsel was sort of downplaying the injection of 50 ballots into the system. Do you recall those questions?
I do.
I believe they were, do you have any evidence those 50 votes were not counted or something along those lines? You recall that question?
I do.
You don't have any evidence that those votes were not counted, do you?
I don't know which ballots those were.
Is that the point?
That is the point. I mean, Denise said that she personally observed 50. She's not there all the time, so we don't know what that number is. And the reason we don't know what number that is because we don't know how many there were supposed to be.
Could it be 5,000?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation, foundation.
I agree, Your Honor.
That's
But
your
the
point.
only-
That's your point, so sustained.
Can't believe we got for trying. That's all we can do, isn't it, Miss Hunt? Is speculate, isn't it?
Well, I strongly dislike speculating, but I think there's just no way to know the answer, and that's the problem. There's
Any
no way to
question
know.
I ask you about how many ballots it could have been would be nothing but pure speculation, isn't that right?
Correct.
And isn't that the problem? Okay, you testified earlier, and this gets back to their, their questions about chain of custody being complicated. You recall that? Is it complicated?
I mean, it's more complicated in Maricopa because they outsource it, but, chain of custody is chain of custody. I want to know how many ballots I'm transferring from point A to point B, and, if you understand, the EAC says it's incredibly important. It's critical for.
All right, now let's go back to your history and your background just very briefly, so I can wrap this up. Supply chain management, what'd you do in that area?
I do consulting in the supply chain space. Again, a lot of it is counter diversion, but it's also in terms of loss prevention.
Okay, loss prevention, all right. And so, do companies pay, and let's talk about widgets, because everybody likes widgets. Do companies pay millions of dollars every year to consultants to help them with their supply chain management?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. It seems to me that this is beyond the scope of the cross-examination.
It is.
Your Honor, he asked her specifically, he asked her, is chain of custody complicated?
Your Honor, I don't believe that was my question.
Hold on.
And my argument is this, Your Honor. if I-
Wait. I'm not in the habit of debating objection or rulings on objections.
Understood, I'm just gonna make a legal argument. But,
Which is an argument with the judge about the ruling on the.
oh no, I'm not trying to argue with the judge, I wanna make a challenge to his objection.
It may be a distinction without a difference, Mr. Platt.
All right, thank you.
But if you're ever in a position where I make a ruling and you think that you need to make a offer of proof to show that I may be mistaken, I will let you do that. Okay? But not back and forth.
Understood.
Discussion or argument, okay?
I'd
So
like to make a quick offer of proof right now.
then go ahead and do that.
Ann or Honey, do companies spend millions of dollars a
Well,
year?
Wait. You're just continuing the questioning.
Oh.
As far as an offer of proof, I want you to tell me what you expect to prove and how that would make a difference with regard to my ruling. That's what an offer of proof.
I guess, Your Honor, I would expect to prove that, big companies spend millions of dollars every year, to get 5,000 widgets to your local Ace Hardware store. And they do it successfully.
I'm not arguing.
And so,
I'm not arguing the concept. I'm arguing that whether or not your offer of proof is going to show me that this is something that was touched on in his cross.
understood. And I'll just move on to my last point. You were part of the 2021 Arizona election, is that correct, Ms. Hunt? is relevant to Mr. LaRue's question to you about the Postal Service receipts. You recall that question?
Yeah, I do.
And Mr. LaRue was telling you, well, those aren't really receipts, are they? Those are weights. Is that true?
I believe Mr. LaRue asked if it was possible that they were weight counts.
Okay. And are weight counts a valid tool to count paper documents?
Yes.
Okay. Why is that?
Scales are precise, and you can determine the weight of a single sheet of paper, you can determine the weight of a single ballot, and then weigh it, and you're within. It's a pretty accurate measurement. That's what weight counting is.
Well, let me ask you this question. During the 2021 audit, did you and your crew weigh all of the ballots?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
I'm getting to my relevance.
I give him some leeway. Go ahead. You can answer it, ma'am. Go ahead.
We didn't weigh all of them, no. We weighed some boxes.
Now, the boxes that you did weigh, was the weight count consistent with the other counts?
Yes.
How many counts did you do? Different counts?
I can't say,
Well, I think there was
half maybe?
the machine count, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't understand your question. Yes. There was a hand count, a weight count, a machine count, and in some cases an audit count, and then there was a count of ballot images as well.
Ballot images. Did you photograph each ballot?
Correct.
You could count those images. And were they all consistent with the weight count?
Yes.
And so if the United States Postal Service or some other large company wants to bill their client for 50,000 pieces of mail, it's an effective way to do so by measuring weight. Isn't that correct?
If it's the same piece of mail type.
Same mail. All right. I have no further questions.
Okay. You'll excuse the witness.
I excuse the witness.
Then, thank you.
No objection, Your Honor.
You're excused. You can sit. Your next witness. Wait. I think we're okay. Your next witness would be?
Your Honor, our next witness is Bradley Bennecourt, please.
Benjamin, yes.
Sir, if you could just stand right there in front of my clerk, she will swear you in. Thank you, sir. You'll make your way around to the witness stand and have a seat, please. Okay. Who's going to do this examination?
I am here.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Olson.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Bettencourt. Would you please state your full name for the record?
Bradley David Bettencourt.
And what is your occupation?
Well, I generally work with real estate and have my own company and work with my dad.
Did you have occasion to be hired by Maricopa County for any elections?
Yes, I decided to work for T-Tech with them. They reached out, I applied, and they reached out after.
And when did they reach out to you?
Oh, a little over a month before the election.
And you're referring to the 2022 general election or the primary?
The general election.
Okay. And what is a T-Tech?
Well, we would set up the sites beforehand and site watch on the days of polling.
And in terms of setting up the sites beforehand, what kind of work were you doing?
Well, we focus mainly on the site books, the printers, and the MoFi, which is like a Wi-Fi.
Okay. And the site books are the device that's used to check in a voter and have their ballot directed towards whatever precinct they're in?
Correct, yes.
And did you have did you participate in the election prior to Election Day in any kind of fashion?
I was working with them for about a month, approximately, and we set up sites beforehand, some of the early polling sites, and we also site watched early, and we actually created a T-Tech group, a text group, to stay in touch while we were site watching.
How was that group set up? Was it through your supervisor or?
Yeah, it was through the supervisor.
And who was that?
That was Jose.
Do you have a last name?
Jose Luis Arbayo.
And is he an employee of Maricopa County?
He's a permanent employee, yes.
And what is his function at Maricopa County?
Well, he was basically our supervisor for the T-Techs. He had been a T-Tech previously as a temporary employee, and he wound up getting a permanent position.
And how many T-Techs were in this group that he set up?
Well, there was him as the supervisor and then 15 T-Techs.
And approximately how many vote centers would be covered by these 15 T-Techs, of which I assume you were one of them?
Correct, yes, I was a T-Tech. So on Election Day, if that's what you're referring to, we all started out at one location. Some of us stayed at that location the whole day, and other ones moved around to multiple locations. If you actually look in one of the exhibits on the text messages, one person had well over 100 miles driving around to probably about 5 or 6 sites throughout the day.
Do you have an estimate as to how many vote centers were covered by the 15 T-Techs, approximately?
I would say a minimum of 20 to 30. That's a bare minimum.
Mm-hmm. And at this point, I would like to bring up Exhibit 58, Your Honor. Go to the next page. And Exhibit 58 is a series of about over 54 pages of text messages. Do you recognize this document, sir?
Absolutely, yes.
And what is it?
It's the group text from that day, the election day.
And is this a group text chats from your phone?
Yes, yes, sir.
And did you provide a declaration in this case?
Yes,
And you swore under oath under the penalty of perjury to tell the truth, correct?
absolutely correct.
And did you, in connection with this declaration, provide screenshots of your text messages with the other T-Techs, the other 15 T-Techs that day?
Yes, correct.
Do you believe this to be, and you can scroll through some, and does this appear to be a true and accurate copy of your text messages?
Yes, sir,
Okay.
it does. There are a lot of issues that came up throughout the day, and including at times T-Techs would say that the ballots look pristine, but the tabulators aren't reading them. So that would really not have to do with the printers, from our point of view. And that wasn't just one person; there were others that said similar things.
Do these text messages represent communications that were happening as they were occurring on Election Day?
Yes, yes, in real time, absolutely.
Your Honor, at this point, we'd like to move for Exhibit 58 to be entered into the record as evidence. It is hearsay, however, under present impression and excited utterance. As you will see, some of them, for example, if we could go to page base number 367. And at the bottom, you'll see, Your Honor, it says, I'm having a 911. I would say that there are a number of, as you just can scroll through, these would classify or qualify as either excited utterance or present sense impression. Certainly, so we would move to have them admitted into the record under those exceptions, Your Honor.
Any objections?
Your Honor, Christina Ford on behalf of the governor-elect. We do object to these coming in. There are more than, I believe, 50 pages of these texts, and one text out of 50 pages that potentially qualifies for an excited utterance doesn't make up for 50 pages of text from this day of otherwise out-of-court statements that they're trying to enter for the truth of the matter.
Your Honor,
Go ahead.
I also submitted them, sir, with under the present sense impression. These are real-time messages, text messages that are being piped in as the events are unfolding, the day of election, and I believe it falls under that exception as well.
Okay. I'm going to allow them because I think that what they represent is the correspondence back and forth between the techs who are working with their immediate impressions of trying to resolve the problem. So go ahead. So what you're offering, what's the number again?
It's 58, Your Honor.
58. So I'll admit 58 over objection. Go ahead.
Mr. Betancourt, can you describe what was going on between you and your other T-Techs on Election Day? If you had to characterize it.
Yeah, we were consistently talking back and forth, trying to solve the problems. And this group was really trying hard because there were a lot of issues that popped up. And actually our main fix turned out to be walk up to the printer, open up the printer, take out the ink cartridge and shake it. So that was our main fix. That was the big one we were intending to do. I know the official county statement was that they changed the printer settings, but I'd say based on the text I saw, that was probably about 10 to 20% of the issue there. So I would say that'd be an incomplete description of the issues from my point of view, seeing the text.
Did the situation resolve very quickly, or did it last throughout the day with the problems?
That depended on the location. Some got better, and some kept having issues. I mean, we had issues. I believe there was one even after closing time where they were asking someone to go over to Biltmore, I believe it is. You can confirm towards the end there.
How would you how old are you, sir?
I'm 34 years old.
Okay. And how long have you been in Arizona?
Well, I've been off and on. I've actually lived in 5 states, but overall, a little over a decade in Arizona.
And so you've been voting for how long?
Well, I've been voting for 16 years, and, in some different states, but mostly in Arizona during that time.
How would you characterize the events on Election Day that you observed personally and also communicated with the fellow T-Techs that were servicing between 20 and 30 vote centers compared to elections, even that you just participated in as a voter?
It felt a bit chaotic. I had people from the other places I've lived reaching out and saying, what's going on in Maricopa County down there? So it felt a little chaotic, I would say.
Were these problems that continued throughout the day at many of these vote centers?
Yeah, and like I said, we tried to shake the ink cartridge. They cleaned the corona wire. They would have the inspector call over a troubleshooter to try to clean the tabulator because, like I said, sometimes in there the prints looked good, but the tabulator wasn't taking them anyway.
Did you hear of any long lines outside of the vote centers?
Oh yeah, there were a lot of long lines, and in there it actually describes, there's at least one in there that it describes, and I know of other locations where they completely wound up shutting down because for a certain amount of time, and they were basically sending people to other locations.
How upset were voters that you interacted with or heard about?
Well, I heard some people being very upset, more so at other locations. We didn't have quite as many issues at our location, but it did shut down for about 5 to 10 minutes at one point with both tabulators being down. And that actually happened because one lady had put in a ballot, and I was standing there when I saw this. The tabulator took it through. It didn't reject it. It took it through, but it didn't have the green check mark or say that it had been successfully cast. So I hadn't seen that on anything else, so we called the inspector over, and she called the hotline, and they said she should open up the blue bin where the tabulator is, pull out the ballots. They were going to count those downtown, and then restart basically from zero, restart counting the ballots that go into that tabulator from that point on.
Did the problems with the tabulators, did they, in your opinion, create the long lines and that you heard about from different T-techs?
I would say it made it worse because we had lines to begin the day, and once those tabulator issues started happening, the lines just backed up more.
And were there lines outside of the voting center?
Oh yeah, I mean, at our place there was a line outside the door all day, and we had less problems than a lot of other places.
And do you understand the check-in process?
That's more the polling worker side of it, the site book area. That's more the poll worker is responsible for that. I wasn't responsible for that part of it.
Okay. Did you hear about long lines extending past 8 o'clock at night?
Yes, it's in the texts. I know at least one or two places, and then I know someone who wasn't in this group because this was the East Valley group, and there was a West Valley group as well. So I know someone in the West Valley. He didn't get home. Like I left my site at about 10, and we had a short line, at the end of the night. Probably wrapped up about 8 p.m. And then this other guy from the West group had left about 10:30, 10:45. And I know there was at least one or two people in this group that left later than me.
Do you know whether or not any people who were waiting in line just simply gave up waiting in line, or saw things on the news and decided that they just didn't have the time to come out and vote?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation, foundation.
You can answer it yes or no. He was asked, do you know? Sir, if you're able to, you can answer yes or no.
Yes, I don't know that personally. As I said, my site had less problems than the others, so I can only speak for my site, and I don't have any knowledge of that specifically.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Betancourt.
Cross-examine.
Good afternoon, Mr. Betancourt.
Good afternoon.
I understand from your testimony and from your declaration in this case that you helped set up equipment in preparation for Election Day.
Correct.
You didn't intentionally cause the tabulators to reject ballots, correct?
No, actually, we weren't even specifically focused on the tabulators with our position.
And you don't know of any other T-techs who intentionally caused the issue?
They were temporary employees, so I don't know of any T-techs that caused that issue. No.
And you said here today that you were hired along with your other T-techs to help resolve problems that were occurring at polling locations, correct?
Yes, that was part of it, the setting up of sites along with resolving problems when they arose.
And then you were in fact deployed to help resolve these issues when they did spike up, correct?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that sometimes tabulators cannot read a ballot due to the way that the voter marks the ballot?
Yes, and I actually wrote that in my declaration as well. that's part of it, but that wasn't the whole part, so I can specify. That was definitely not the whole part. There were some that looked very good, and the voters had marked them very well, and they weren't being read.
Okay, well, I wanted to go through some of those. So I understand from your declaration that you and your fellow T-Techs sometimes found that cleaning the corona wire and the printer would sometimes help fix the tabulator issue. Is that correct?
Yes, and the corona wire, that was on the older printers. I actually had the newer Lexmarks at the location I was at, so that wasn't part of the location I was at.
Okay. And the group also found that changing the toner or shaking the toner could sometimes make improvements to the tabulators?
Yeah, shaking the toner actually worked a decent amount. It wasn't perfect, but it helped at times.
Okay. And then you all also found that letting the printer warm up could also improve the situation?
We have to go back through the text and confirm that. I don't recall that specifically, but there were a lot of texts in there, so I don't recall every text that we had.
Okay. You have no personal knowledge as to whether the printing and tabulator errors changed the outcome of the collection. The outcome of the election, correct?
I don't see how there's any way I could prove that one way or the other.
But you have no personal knowledge.
I believe I just said I can't prove anything one way or another by myself.
Okay. So you similarly do not have any personal knowledge of whether the printing errors were the result of an intentional scheme to undermine the election?
Well, I was just a temporary employee doing what I was employed to do.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Nothing further? Okay. Can we excuse the witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
You're free to go. Thank you. Next witness.
Your Honor, we next call Mark Sonnenklar.
Mr. Sinclair, if you could just come over in front of the clerk. Just a moment. If you could just basically have a seat and give us stamp this. Go ahead, Mr. Olson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sonnenklar.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your full name for the record?
Mark Sonnenklar, S as in Sam, O-N-N-E-N-K-L-A-R.
And what is your occupation, sir?
I'm a lawyer,
And how long have you been a lawyer?
26, almost 27 years.
Did you have an opportunity to, well, strike that. How long have you lived in Arizona?
Moved back to Arizona about 2 years ago, a little more than 2 years ago. I was here from age 9 through 21, so I don't know, what, 13 years total?
Did you have an opportunity to participate in the 2022 election cycle?
I did.
And in what capacity did you participate in that cycle?
I was a roving attorney in the Republican National Committee's election integrity program for the primary and the general election.
And what does a roving attorney do?
A roving attorney goes to the vote centers and just observes what is happening at the vote centers to determine if, things are going well or not, whether things are working in accordance with law.
And when did you first act as a roving attorney?
During the primary on August 2nd, 2022.
And can you describe what you did as a roving attorney during the primary?
The process that I used, which we were trained to use for both the primary and the general election, was to go to the vote center, talk to the inspector, go directly to the inspector of that vote center.
Who is an inspector?
The inspector is the lead person, the lead poll worker at a vote center. So,
are they employed by Maricopa County?
Yes, I believe they are paid by Maricopa County.
Is that a temporary position, or are they a full-time employee of Maricopa?
They're temporary.
Okay.
So I would go to the vote center. I would ask for the inspector. I would ask the inspector if there was a Republican observer inside the vote center, because there's not, by law, we're not allowed to have more than 2 observers from any one party within the vote center. I would ask to speak with the Republican observer if there was one outside. I would ask that Republican observer how things were going, what he or she was seeing inside the vote center. I would take notes on what the observer, the Republican observer, told me. I would then ask the Republican observer to remain outside, and then I would go back into the vote center and speak with the inspector and ask really the same questions that I had asked the Republican observer. How are things going? If there were issues, I would ask more questions about those issues, and I was trying to determine whether what the Republican observer was telling me was matching up with what the inspector was telling me. And I took notes while I was talking with the inspectors as well.
Did you create a report in connection after the election associated with that? And I'm talking about the primary.
I did. I had a sense that there was going to be litigation, and I knew that I had information that would be critical to that litigation. And so I reached out to, there were 17 or 18, I'm not clear exactly, but I believe there were 17 roving attorneys in the program with the RNC. And I reached out to all of them and asked them what their experience was. And they reported to me, and I created a report based on my own personal experience at 10 vote centers during the general election, and 105 other vote centers that the roving attorneys who responded to me, which I believe were 10, I believe, responded to me and were willing to tell me what had occurred, what they had seen. So the 11 of us put together observed at 115 vote centers.
How many vote centers did you personally visit?
10.
10. And this is during the general election, correct?
Yes.
And what was your experience and what you personally saw at those 10 vote centers?
Well, it was really pandemonium out there, everywhere. I was within, from Fountain Hills to North Scottsdale, or where my vote centers were. I started out in Fountain Hills, and immediately, there was a line of 150 people at Fountain Hills. The tabulators were not working, and that was what I saw at, I saw the same thing happening at 6 of my 10 vote centers. There were different things happening at some of the other ones too, but 6 of them in particular were really bad.
And so you've been voting for a number of years, correct?
Yeah.
How would you characterize the events of the 2022 general election compared to other elections that you witnessed?
Oh, this was a completely different animal here. So I was a roving attorney during the primary, and there were, some minimal problems there too. But the general election was a completely different situation. There were lines out the door which you did not see during the primary at many of the vote centers. There were angry and frustrated voters who did not want to put their ballots into box 3. There, it was just, and then there were the poll workers who were extremely frustrated and really didn't know what to do. Most of them, I would say, were doing their best, to figure out a solution to the fact that the tabulators were down, were not reading the ballots. Everyone was just freaked out.
A question for you. There's been some testimony earlier about wait times. Do you have an understanding of how the county measures wait times?
Yes, I understand that one of the poll workers is supposed to check the line every 15 minutes and report back to MCTEC, is my understanding. It would have been difficult. I don't know where you're going with the question, but it would have been very difficult for the poll workers who were crazed trying to figure out just how to get the tabulators to read the ballots. I can't imagine that there was time for any poll workers at the worst vote centers anyway to actually go out and check the line.
I believe you mentioned that you visited personally about 10 vote centers.
Yes.
And that the other roving attorneys that you were working with, it was a total of about 115 vote centers in total.
Yes.
And that's 115 out of about, I think, 223 vote centers, correct?
That's correct.
So that's a little over half of the vote centers.
I believe it was 52%.
How are you able to characterize what your the other roving attorneys were experiencing, whether it was similar to what you were experiencing, or worse, or maybe not as bad? How would you characterize?
Well, I would say that most of the roving attorneys had a similar experience to mine. I can't think of one that had a different experience. There may be, but for the most part, aggregated together, pretty much everyone had the same experience. And
if somebody were to characterize the events of that day as minor technical difficulties that should be expected in any election, what would you say to that?
I would say that's nonsense. When you have 132, we've been able to document that there were at least 132 vote centers with tabulator problems out of 227, which comes out to about 59%. I don't see how that could be characterized as a small matter.
You mentioned you created a report along with the other roving attorneys that you worked with. Did you disseminate that report to anybody?
I did send that report out. Yes, I did.
Do you believe that report is accurate in its recitation of the events of Election Day?
Absolutely. I was very careful not to exaggerate, overstate. I was careful to be factual.
And is that report based on sworn conversations plus sworn declarations from the other roving attorneys that were given to you?
Yes, it is.
And if you would call up Exhibit 52.
That's wrong. Wrong piece of.
What's going on?
Pulled up the wrong system.
Is there a problem?
I'm being told that the person over here needs to do it. It's up on our screen here, Your Honor.
It's the podium, actually, is what you want to bring up. There you go.
Can you go to the top? And Mr. Sonnenclair, is this a
For Maricopa County, I would object to this document to the extent that it's duplicative of this witness's testimony just provided in this board, and to the extent that it is intended to be admitted for the truth of the matter asserted for persons he's talked to, it would be hearsay.
Your Honor, we have submitted this report under Rule 807. It is one of the documents that we gave notice to. And I would say that Your Honor can judge the value of the weight, but given, as the witness has testified to, we're talking about 105 vote centers. And so that he and his other fellow roving attorneys gave sworn testimony about the occurrences there. I think it should go to the weight, Your Honor. I think it would be probative, and given the limited time we have to talk about 105 vote centers, that we respectfully request Your Honor to admit it.
He's here to testify about what he saw, he observed. And so it's cumulative as to that. I think this morning I told you that I was willing to admit under 807 the attached statements of the other roving attorneys. So you can choose. You can choose to either have those affidavits admitted under 807, or you can forego that and ask him questions about it and go with his report. But I'm not going to do both.
Your Honor, just point of clarification.
That's a threefer. That's him testifying, his report, and the affidavits that he's referring to in his testimony and his report. So I don't know if you understood this morning that I was willing to admit the affidavits attached to Mr. Sonnenclair's affidavit under 807, provided that you could, because I've read them.
Yes, Your Honor.
And I believe that under 807, the same analysis applies to what I told you this morning, that they appeared to also be very factual as opposed to advocacy, even though I believe that he's just said all of this was prepared as in anticipation of litigation, but the affidavits are sworn to and contain facts rather than advocacy or opinions. So after all my speaking, your choice how you wish to proceed, Mr. Olson, but I'm not going to do both. I'm not going to put in all those affidavits and have him talk about everything in his report and all the hearsay.
I think I know where I'm going, sir. We will forego. We will keep them into evidence, as Your Honor alluded to, and we will move on to another topic.
Okay, very good, sir.
Can you pull up? Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to open up Exhibit 91. Sonneclair, up on the screen is what has been marked for identification as Exhibit 91. It is an exhibit that was part of a response letter by Maricopa County to the AG's letter dated November 19th, questioning some of the events around Election Day. Have you ever seen this document before?
Yes, I've read it multiple times.
And do you recognize this as a document that was produced by Maricopa County?
Yes.
Do you have any reason to doubt that it's a true and accurate copy?
No.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time we would move to admit Exhibit 91 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor. 91 is admitted. I think it's a self-authenticating document.
Making sure. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Sonneclair, do you see where it states on the first page of this document, in the paragraph beginning, while a few, you see that? While a few 2022 general election locations encountered 80 to 115-minute wait times on Election Day, Maricopa County posted these wait times on our website, informing voters of other nearby options that had shorter times.
Yes, I see it.
Do you have an understanding, based on your work, whether or not that's an accurate statement?
That's not an accurate statement.
And why do you say that?
There were many more vote centers. I mean, I must have had, I believe I had 2 at least, just in my 10, that had longer wait times than 80 minutes. And they're not included in the list in footnote 1.
And you're talking about footnote 1 on the page that's Bates stamped, last 3 digits, 715, the first page of this document?
And in addition to that, you know, we documented through declarations that there were many, many other vote centers that had over 80-minute wait times.
Do you have an opinion as to whether or not the county has been trying to understate the extent of the problems at the vote centers that arose on Election Day?
Yes,
Your Honor, object to foundation and speculation.
All right. As to foundation, I'd overrule it. So, if you're able to answer it, and I assume you're asking him based on his personal knowledge.
Yes, John.
If you're able to answer it, Mr. Sonneclair.
thank you. Well, I mean, I was the one who oversaw the putting together of the issues spreadsheet, which showed how many vote centers had tabulator problems, how many vote centers had long lines. I've also read this Board of Supervisors report multiple times, and there are many, many mischaracterizations and flat-out falsehoods in this. Now, so yes, I believe that they have not presented the truth here in this document.
We have nothing further at this time, sir.
Cross-exam, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sonneclair. I'm here on behalf of the governor-elect. Your declaration gives some figures about how many vote centers were affected with tabulator issues and lines. And these figures were gathered from reports of yourself, other RNC roving attorneys, and Republican observers, correct?
That's correct.
Your declaration in this case concludes that 64 of 223 vote centers had long lines on election day, correct?
That's correct.
So you concluded that more than 70% of vote centers on election day did not have long lines?
You could infer that. But actually, what I would say about that is that we had time constraints in putting together our issues spreadsheet. And so I firmly believe that had we had additional time, we had to put it together in 2 weeks. So we had to gather declarations from a lot of people in order to prove what we wanted to prove. You know, in order for the evidence to show 64, we showed on the issues spreadsheet that 64 vote centers had long lines. Had we had more time, I firmly believe that we would have been able to show that more vote centers had long lines.
The same declaration concluded that only 24 of 223 vote centers had long lines on election day after 3 p.m., correct?
I would say the same thing. Had we had more time to gather the evidence, we probably would have been able to find that more than 24. But what we were able to document in the time period that we had was that 24, which in my view is a lot of vote centers to have problems after 3 p.m., given the fact that the Board of Supervisors stated that the problem was completely resolved as of mid-afternoon, quote unquote, according to the Board of Supervisors report that it was just brought into evidence.
But the evidence that you put forward in your declaration was that only 24 of 223 had long lines after 3 p.m., correct?
That's all I was able to conclude in the time that I had to put together the issues spreadsheet.
Any voter in Maricopa County may go to any vote center they wish, correct?
That's my understanding.
You did not personally witness any voter who left a vote center without casting a ballot after encountering a tabulator rejection, correct?
I wasn't looking for that.
So here today you can't tell me that you witnessed that?
I can't, but a lot of the declarations do indicate that that did occur over and over.
You have no personal knowledge as to whether these printing errors changed the outcome of the election, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Foundation.
Your Honor, I'm just asking whether he knows.
His knowledge, it's the same thing. If you know, sir, and you're able to answer,
Well,
go ahead.
I would say, you know, there's only 17,000 roughly votes separating the two candidates for governor. Based on what I saw on election day, I would say there's no question in my mind that had there not been tabulator issues at 132 vote centers, this election would have ended up with Kari Lake winning.
But that's an inference you're making, correct? You just
asked me for my opinion, and I gave it.
I didn't ask for your opinion. I asked if you had personal knowledge.
I don't have knowledge of specific numbers, no.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Mrs. Sunclair, you testified that the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, in drafting its correspondence to Jennifer Wright at the Attorney General's office, intended to deceive her. Is that correct?
I don't see how you could.
Is that correct?
I don't see how you could view what happened on election day and issue that report in good faith.
Do you have any evidence that the authors of that wrote that report with an intent to deceive?
It's just common sense, sir.
Is that a yes or a no?
Common sense tells you that if they issued that report and they are the ones in charge of the election, then And so many things in that report were false that, yeah, they were trying to cover up.
So that's what common sense tells me? Is that your testimony?
Yeah, common sense tells me that there was a cover up here.
Okay, that tells you, but not me, as you earlier testified.
I don't know what's in your mind, sir.
But you do know what's in the mind of the 5 members of the Board of Supervisors.
All I can say is that I believe that they were trying to cover up here, because I don't see how else you could explain the Board of Supervisor report. It was blatantly false in so many ways.
But you have no evidence of that, correct?
Oh, no, I have a lot of evidence.
Evidence of their intent to deceive the Attorney General's office.
My conclusion is that there is an intent to deceive.
Okay, so your testimony today is you can't read my mind, but you can read the mind of the members of the Board of Supervisors. Is that correct?
I don't see how else you could interpret the statements on the Board of Supervisor report other than to conclude that there was an intent to minimize the problems on election day, because they probably knew they were going to be in this courtroom today.
Well, it's interesting that you've just responded to my query by saying problems plural, because when you initially testified, you said problems singular. And your testimony was about problems related to tabulators. Do you remember that testimony?
Do you mean in my declaration?
No, I mean in your testimony right here in this courtroom a few minutes ago.
Yes, I recall my testimony.
Okay. And you recall that you had witnessed at least 2 vote centers, and you've heard of a lot of others that had problems with tabulators.
No, there were 6 vote centers out of 10 in my that I observed at that had material tabulator problems.
Okay. Did any of them have printer problems?
Yeah, you know, my understanding is that the printers were not printing dark enough. That is one theory, anyway.
Was that your understanding from your direct observation?
Yes.
So you were able to observe the printers putting in not enough ink in some of the ballots?
So my declaration sets this out. At one of the vote centers that I went to, I spoke with the inspector. They had a massive problem with the tabulator not working.
Okay, thank you. You've already testified about your conversation with the inspector. I heard that, and I thank you for that.
No, may I
But my
actually
question,
answer your question?
yes, please. My question was your observation.
This is
of
my
the
answer.
Excuse me. Your observation with the problems with the printers, not what you heard from inspectors. Can you answer that?
My observation was in relation to a conversation I had with the inspector.
So that would be, you heard it from somebody else who observed it, but you didn't.
I'm not a technical person. I don't know exactly what caused the problem, okay? But an inspector showed me the ballots.
Okay, so you don't know what caused the problem, right? But you know that whatever the Board of Supervisors said was intended to deceive the Attorney General, even though you don't know, correct?
I don't see what one thing has to do with the other.
And there's a problem as well. How about wet pens? Wet pens that might cause problems with the tabulators. Did you observe any of that?
No, I didn't note that at all.
No. So you had testified earlier that you have voted several times in Arizona, but you've never seen lines like the lines you saw in the general election in 2022. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Did you vote in the presidential preference of 2016?
No, I wasn't here in 2016.
Would it surprise you to find out that in many instances, all over this country, there have been lines far longer than those to which you just testified to?
I would be surprised by that, yeah.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Can I just have a brief question on redirect?
It's your favorite word. Go ahead.
Mr. Sonnenclair, would it surprise you if people in Maricopa County, voters in Maricopa County, heard about the problems at all the vote centers and simply didn't get into line to vote because they didn't have time?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation, foundation, beyond the scope of the law.
Do you have a belief as to and it's a yes or no question. Do you have a belief as to whether or not voters on election day, strike that. Do you have a belief that there were voters on election day that were not able to cast their vote and wanted to?
Same objections, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Your Honor, I have no further questions. I do have a housekeeping measure. I just wanted to make sure with our 807, I just want to make a point of clarification. We had a summary exhibit, 2 summary exhibits that were attached to his declaration, and we are moving those. I want to make sure that that was part of the evidence that Your Honor was.
Are you planning to rest?
Pardon me?
Are you planning to rest now?
Yes.
Okay. Can we excuse this gentleman?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. St. Clair. You're excused. Yes. Okay. Can you hang with me for a little bit? I'm pushing my court reporter beyond what I should. What I'm hearing is plaintiffs are willing to rest with the exception of addressing the exhibit issue. You won't, I understand you need to address the issue before you rest.
We're not resting our case, Your Honor. I still have a couple more witnesses to do.
Okay.
I wasn't resting on that.
Okay. Do both sides have worked out the exhibit numbers that would apply to my ruling this morning? No? Okay.
I don't think we talked so much.
Here's what I can't do at the end of this day. I can't put my court reporter through another hour of us going back and forth about whether a certain exhibit fits within my ruling or not. This is probably a poor question. In fact, I want to ask it. I'm going to restate what I told you this morning. I said that the 807 ruling was extended to admitting whatever exhibits are associated with. The following exhibits are attachments to the affidavit that you filed, Mr. Olson. Exhibit 6, Exhibit 7, Exhibit 8, 9 and 10 have already been admitted today. And that takes care of all the attachments to the affidavit that was filed by Mr. Olson. There's a more extensive list constituting what plaintiffs have labeled exhibits A1 through A220 that were attached to Mr. Sontclair's affidavit. And I don't have before me the corresponding exhibit numbers for the exhibits that would have been the other attorney poll workers that were submitted, but those were included in that. So here's what I want you to do is I want you to get together, caucus, come up with an agreed list of what those numbers are. I've already basically told you what the ruling is. I just need you to make sure we've got clear which exhibits are coming in, okay? So I can spare my clerk or my court reporter all that back and forth. I need that by the morning, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. I've been keeping track of the time, but I haven't got a grand total. Somebody else keeping track closely? Do you know where you are with regard to time?
We have somebody tracking, Your Honor, for us, but I don't.
Okay. How many more witnesses do you have, Ms. Schultz?
Your Honor, I believe it's just one,
Which would be,
Richard Barris.
that's gonna take a while. If it's anything like Mr. Breek, you know, which is your other expert,
Your Honor, I don't think it will take as long as Mr. Parikh. Famous last words. But,
I'm smiling again because we're down to the brief, and I've only got a few things, Your Honor.
Your Honor, if I may, our records indicate the plaintiff has consumed 272 minutes, 22 seconds, and defense together has consumed 87 minutes, 27 seconds.
Your Honor, I'll have to check with our person.
Okay. If I take his total, that puts you at 4.5 hours.
Yes, Your Honor.
So you'd still have another hour with Mr. Barris, right? What about your case, well, all three of you? What do you think about how many witnesses are you thinking about calling?
We have 4 witnesses that we intend to call if we put on our case in chief tomorrow.
Part of my problem is that if you spent all your time, then there's nothing left for cross-examination.
I'm aware of that, Your Honor.
Okay. It's a strategy call, so you got 4 witnesses. How much time do you think? Again, I'm skating fast on thin ice, talking to lawyers about time estimates.
Well, I will of course promise that we're going to be as efficient as possible. We'll use tonight to make sure we have estimates in what we submitted to the court, and we'll go back and see if we can pare those down to make sure we're staying within time.
Okay, that's fair. Here's my concern, and even with, I know what I said about the time, but I'm concerned about closing arguments. Okay. I do want to hear closing argument. Okay. So I'm not saying that means you got to go out and drag in more witnesses tomorrow to use up all your time, but
For closing.
that'll probably put us though, realistically, we're gonna start at 8:30, we're gonna come back at 1, mid-afternoon. That may be fuzzy math, but, best guesstimate. So at that point in time, I do want you to prepare closings. How much time do you think you would need to sum it all up? That's the both of you, I'm asking.
Your Honor, I think that we would not need any more than 15 minutes.
I think we'd be more like 20, Your Honor.
Well, okay. But they carry the burden. So I'm not gonna hold you to the, 15, 20. If they have 20, you do 15. If you want 5 rebuttal at the end, I'd give it to you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Sound fair?
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Well, the goal is to get all of that done by tomorrow then. Okay? So, tonight, you're gonna put your heads together, come up with a list of exhibits for me by morning. get the exhibit straightened out. We'll do that as a matter of housekeeping first thing. And I think that's all I've got for you tonight. I can let you go. Is there anything absolutely essential before my court reporter collapses?
I'm not saying anything.
Nothing for defendants, Your Honor.
Thank you all. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 8.
All right.